this was, I wasn't sure the one, I thought this was a call to order, confirmation of the agenda, that the council of the Township of North Huron accept the agenda for February 3rd, 2020 council meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? I have Paul, I have Anita. All in favor? Carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interests. Go ahead.
I
Chris.
do, Reeve. It's for item 7.1.2.
Thank you, Chris. Number 4, public comments. This is an opportunity for the public to speak to any item on the business agenda for today. You can have, for tonight, you can have 2 minutes to speak to it, if you'd like to talk about anything that is on the agenda. Not seeing anyone, we will move along. Consent agenda that the council of the Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent items 5.1.1 to 5.1.3. And further, that the council of the Township of North Huron hereby receive consent items 5.1.4 and 5.1.3.10 for information. Do I have a mover? I have Rick. Do I have a seconder? I have Paul. Would anybody like to speak to anything in that agenda, in those agenda items? Christopher, go ahead.
It's just a reminder, and it's the impact report, 533. You just want to bring it to everyone's attention how much the farmland has been increasing at 11.6%. It's by far the highest amount of assessment that's growing, and I just wanted everyone to know that, and it's not getting any better.
I'll follow up with you that on a county level. We've had that discussion at county quite a bit lately. And as the mayor of ACW said, it just seems to be the farming turn that he's been on this long enough to realize that it's their circle and everything goes up and nothing comes down. And Paul Klopp made the statement that, well, if I don't pay it on my farm, I gotta pay it on my house. So I just wanted you to know those conversations are taking place at a little higher level too. Anyone else? Go ahead, Anita.
Yeah, I just would like to inform council that I am going to 5.3.6 Ontario Farmland Trust Forum on March 26th.
Great. Maybe you can give us a little update when you come back.
You can still.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, 5.3.1, it's just about the policing. I know we're not supposed to compare, but I heard on the radio how the policing time, the calls were down, and I noticed in the fourth quarter that they seem to be down, so I hope it's a good thing, but it's something I know we can't go by.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was interesting. I think it's up north somewhere where they had the same thing.
Yeah, it's a nice trend to see, isn't it? Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Number 6, public meetings and hearings and delegations. Laura Edgar, would you like to come up? She's the public health promoter here in Perth Public Health. And she's going to talk about the legislative changes related to the ATV road allowance and other considerations.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
So your presentation's on.
It is on there?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, well, thank you. Welcome. Thank you for having me here today. And, oh, let's try to figure this out. Oh,
It should be pulled up at the bottom.
I see. Okay. Thank you very much. So my name is Laura Edgar, and I work at the newly formed Huron-Perth Public Health in injury prevention. I also sit on shift with Rick, and thank you for coming out to those, Rick. Yeah, just hear about the ATV road access. I wanted to come, so I heard you had a proposal for access to get into town from the trailhead. And then I also was hearing a lot from the government about provincial legislation changes. So with those two things coming together, I wanted to write to you guys to share what I know, and so you can take that into consideration. So first up, we'll talk about the legislation changes, risks of on-road quad use, some other areas for consideration, and communication. So the first slide just goes over a couple terms. So I'm going to try to use the word quad. Some ATV, all-terrain vehicle, can be a bit of a misnomer or odd name because they're not suitable for all terrains. And as we'll see during the presentation, that pavement on-road use is a terrain that they're not designed for. There's lots of other. On here we have a three-wheeler, not legal. Dirt bikes, that's going to come up. UTV, side-by-side, Argos. So at first, the provincial legislation was mainly about that first type of single rider straddle type quad. In 2015, they opened it up, and now UTVs, side-by-sides, and two-up ATVs can be allowed on the road as well. And we'll get talking about too that some of these other off-road vehicle types are being thrown in the mix with some of these changes as well. This little card, our group Coalition for Huron Injury Prevention made up a couple years ago, just goes over some of the basic rules. So when we're talking about road access, these are just for people who have a driver's license already, who are over 16, insurance, registration, plates. Then when you're on the road, you're expected to drive on the shoulder with traffic, unless the shoulder isn't available, then in the roadway. And I think something that isn't commonly known is there are lower speed limits set for off-road vehicles when they use the road. So if you're in a zone that's greater than 50, so an 80 or a 90 zone, the ATV speed limit is supposed to be 50 kilometers an hour. And if it's in a place where the speed limit is 50 or lower, the speed limit is 20 kilometers an hour. There's lots of other little rules about passengers, age of passengers, that I could answer if they were of interest. Anyways, here's the legislation changes. So last year, the Getting Ontario Moving Act came around, and AMO responded, and this part that was about the off-road vehicles, they weren't in favor of, but I believe it's going forward anyways. So it flips the legislative onus. So whereas before, like North Huron does not have a bylaw for ATVs, that meant ATVs weren't allowed. And all this is about non-farm use as well. So if you're using it for farm purposes, this doesn't apply. But this is more for using it for transportation or recreation. But this new legislation will flip it so that if you don't have a bylaw, ATVs are allowed on your roads. So I'm working on some communications across southwestern Ontario too to get this information out to municipalities. But I just thought I'd give it to you guys as soon as possible since you're looking at making this decision now anyways. The second act that came out is also going to permit municipalities to decide whether they want to broaden it from the typical straddle four-wheeler and may also include dirt bikes and Argos or whatever you guys decide, I suppose. I did get clarification though that it would have to be stated in a bylaw. I was a little bit worried at one point, like if you didn't have a bylaw, that your roadways would now be open up to ATVs and dirt bikes and Argos, and that seemed like a bit of a headache from my perspective. But you would need to specify it anyways. So that was kind of a relief to find out. Anyways, my main point being, regardless of what you decide with the request, I think creating a bylaw would be advisable. Since you're discussing it and thinking about it now, probably within a year's time, the legislation will take effect, and you'll kind of be wanting to make a decision one way or another anyways. So when it comes to road use, it comes right on the warning labels. it's not a good mix under the never operate, you have never use on public roads, and under the always part of the label, it says always avoid paved surfaces. Pavement may seriously affect handling and control. That's what all the label warnings say. There are design features with quads that make them really great for off-roading, but don't mix with the road. So it's the low tire pressures can result in loss of control, run off the road, or rollovers. When cornering, the high center of gravity and narrow wheelbase require wider turns. When I was looking at the route though, I mean, I don't know what the angle is, and other people will know better than me what a good angle you need to turn your ATV is, but I was happy to see there weren't any like, you know, acute angles on the suggested path. Like they're all at least 90 degrees or wider. So that seemed like a positive note about the proposed path. And the increasing speeds and weights have led to more danger with, you know, faster and I have down there the word asphyxiation as well. That can happen with ATVs. Also there's injury research. So I work in injury prevention. Really that's why I'm here today. So there's research from the United States at least, which isn't always, you know, it's always nicer when it's local, but quad riders take more risks when they're on the road. So it's kind of that perception that's a bit safer there. Sometimes they can drive faster, maybe less likely to wear protective gear. Now that's in the States as well. Maybe we're a bit more stringent about our helmet use here. There's the risk of colliding with other vehicles, of course, once you get on the road. And we did see that happen inside Blythe several years ago. Just increases that risk, right? And some research has shown that this risk does, and we've seen the label about paved surfaces, but this risk can carry over to unpaved surfaces as well. So just want to be aware of that aspect, that risk of the decision. So on-road use of quads is risky and can result in loss of life or life-altering injuries. So it can, so just, you know, for consideration. I thought I'd throw in some Huron stats. This isn't about specifically on-road quad use. I just thought it was interesting though. We've got some kind of easing comparators. So Huron, you might see something you'll notice, it says less than 5. So usually when we're talking about health data, if it's less than 5, we don't publish it because then it's identifiable. So it just says less than 5. But you can see for 4 of the 5 years shown, there is at least one, maybe more, ATV off-road deaths. And you can see kind of for some comparator areas, Gray had 0 for all of those 5 years. Perth had 0 for all those 5 years. Bruce has one column where they had less than 5. Just that when it comes to risk-taking behavior, our residents end up hospitalized more than you might expect them to be. Here we see, you know, 50% of all these injuries happen between 10 and 24 years old. It's mainly young males, and I know I don't have the graph here, but it is, I mean, we would expect to be higher than the provincial average, but we're also higher than rural comparators, which we might not expect. So just some other areas for consideration as you're making your decision. You might want to consult with, you know, insurance, think about liability claims, potential, and or how to mitigate those if you do move forward. Public Works, I imagine, would be a very good people to consult with, you know, looking out at the route, seeing what drop-offs are like at the intersections, what's happening. Is it a yield sign? Is it a stop sign? What are the sight lines like? That can make a big impact when you're talking about traffic at variable speeds. Is there a lot of hills? You know, if a car has to take evasive action, what might happen? Are there steep drop-offs at the side of the ditch? There was a fatality near Seaforth area. Somebody was riding on the road and not sure why, but left the roadway and flipped and unfortunately died. Another group you might want to consult with is Conservation Authority. I was looking along and I saw, I believe the path goes by 2 different conservation areas. Is it Stapleton and Turnberry? You'll know your geography better than I will. I noticed one was quite close to the parking lot, so just I'm sure the Conservation Authority would be interested as well. And enforceability. OPP always have a say in this, and if you're making the bylaw too, whether there's certain things they'd want included. I know some jurisdictions kind of put a time of day usage on it, and so there's lots of little things to consider to try to mitigate stuff. Communication signage, I saw some things in the proposal about signage, and that sounds good. I kind of wonder whether these speed limits would be able to be posted. I don't know for sure though, so something to consider. And I don't know whether there's a sign at the parking lot or not. No, I was trying to just on Google look at it, and I wasn't sure if there's a sign at the parking lot to know that that's where the trail starts. And also just mentioning, I think you're aware that CHIP is creating a road map to show where you can ride. So if you did decide to open up this smaller portion of road, we'd be able to communicate that on the map. And I did double check with GIS that they could do an inset, because it is like when we have the map, it's quite big, and so you might be worried that a smaller section might not show up well, but it will be bigger than this, but they'll be able to do a little zoomed in portion if that's the way you decide to go. Yeah. So anyways, I do think creating a bylaw would be advisable considering the provincial legislation changes coming. I don't want to see you guys in a place where you're going from no ATVs to ATVs on all roads, and it's too bad it's being put in that situation. And the on-road use of quads is risky. Comes with a lot of risks that if you do go down that path, you just want to try to mitigate them as best as possible. And that's all. Feel free to get in touch as you move forward. I'm happy to consult or be involved. And thank you. I'm happy for any questions.
Thank you very much, Laura. From the council, is there any questions, concerns, comments? Go ahead.
Through you, Reeve. Do you know of any changes to the Insurance Act or the insurance requirement once ATVs are on the road? Would they change? Like, would they have have to have the same liability as a motorcycle going down the road?
They are. I think that would all stay the same. They are required to have insurance. Maybe not for farm use, but for other uses, they are supposed to have the insurance and plates. I'm not sure if it's the same as motorcycles or a bit different, but yes, we include that on their insurance and registration. So if you were pulled over, you should be showing your driver's license, insurance, registration, all that. But I don't know of any changes to the act related to these legislation changes. But yeah, that'd be especially if you're dirt bike. Municipality decides to let dirt bikes on the roads, and I think that the purpose of that is just you have trails, like say up north you have trails, and you have 2 kilometers of road that you want to connect one trailhead to the other trailhead to allow that to happen, but otherwise.
Just on a motorcycle, if you were a young rider, they're limited to a certain CC size because they wouldn't be able to afford the insurance on 1,000 CC. I just wonder if that had crept into the these as well.
That would be very interesting.
Anita, you had a question.
Yeah, the map you just showed us, is
Yeah.
that map the current map from ATV?
It's a little not current because we wanted to make the changes that Havoc made, and then we heard about this proposal, so we thought, well, we'll just do all the changes at once, and so we'll wait until we know. But yeah, that's kind of I think I have a bigger one in here. There we go. It's essentially, and we're still kind of toying with the colors because we want to make sure it's easy to read if you're colorblind.
So if I'm right, everywhere people can ride their ATVs except in North.
Not in Blue Water,
And not in Blue Water.
Goderich. They recently changed Halix.
Okay, so do you have any statistics how many problems people have in those other areas around us?
I don't have it written
Not
down.
from like years ago, but from recently?
I am aware of the one that happened outside of Blythe in Morris Turnberry area, and that was a collision between a four-wheeler and a pickup truck carrying, father and 3 kids. There's one outside of Seaforth area, I believe, also where they're allowed, and that's where he went off the road and flipped. I thought I heard about one in South Huron area, but I couldn't find it. Anytime you search South Huron and ATV fatality now, you just get the one about the missing South Huron man who was missing for several weeks and found off-road. So.
Are you looking into special rules or for motorbike riders as well? Because that's pretty dangerous on the road as well.
So I did a quick ask to somebody who is, their job is research, whether they knew if there's much research about dirt bikes on roads. It's like, I don't think many jurisdictions allow that, so there isn't much research on it. But yeah, I agree, it is dangerous.
Yeah, there's snowmobiles and golf carts and all kinds of motor equipped stuff on the road.
And I mean,
So-
all those things are, golf carts aren't legal to be on the road. Snowmobiles, I was just thinking the other day, I'm like, it's never even come up, like, I don't know what the laws are, whether, about snowmobiles on roads. But I would imagine you wouldn't want to drive your machine on pavement. But I don't know.
On the shoulder, they will.
Yeah, so I haven't looked into the snowmobile part.
No.
Yeah, this
Okay.
legislation just deals with kind of off-road vehicles, excluding snowmobiles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Christopher?
Yeah, through you, Reeve. Laura, you better look into the snowmobiles because they've been more active through the years and they are everywhere. Accidents happen no matter what I got hurt by a tractor, so are all tractors bad? No. A lot of it is common sense and if someone's gonna have a wipeout, doesn't matter what you're driving, and you're going too fast or you turn too sharp, you do something stupid, that's your fault. And what I'd like to see, and I'm pretty sure, I was talking with ATV Association, and I forget the name of it, at Roma. At Roma.
The Eastern Ontario Trail Alliance?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you get a good sense of how they want to project themselves, and they want safety's number one, and you want to be a member. This is what you're going to do, and you're going to drive 20 kilometers an hour. Blah blah blah. And I know that right now Wingham is the only town through their system that doesn't have legal access, but other towns allow it. So, it's not like we would be leading edge by any means. What the associations are doing, you should talk with them and find out the good things that they do.
Well, I mean, you kind of saw, and you can't make a causal link, but there's really lovely trails, Grey Bruce, and there weren't many fatalities in Grey Bruce.
No?
So, especially, trail riding, ATV on a trail, it's great.
Yeah. I just want you to know that there are groups that want this to work.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, there'll be idiots out there that don't. And they're in trouble anyways. And whether they have a snowmobile or an Argo, it doesn't matter. They're going to have troubles eventually. But they won't be part of the association. And I know that the group is hoping that they'll become as popular as the snowmobile associations because they swing a big
Mm-hmm.
a big bat, and you know,
Yeah, I
and
think they've definitely had some successes with that
yeah,
organization.
and so there you go. So you know, I know that they want to emulate them, and so we got to give them a chance. And of course, it's going to be growing pains, no matter what. It doesn't matter what you do, but you know, you sorry, but I really got the impression you're coming down hard on them, and. You know, yeah, the law is going to change to where they're going to be available, or they can go on the roads. So yeah, I think it's smart that we, all municipalities, you know, address it, but address it in a smart way. And
Oh, definitely. You're,
anyways.
yeah, totally your decision to make. Just wanted to bring to light some things, and especially with the legislation changing, I thought, well, no better time to send a letter, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyone else, other councilors like to speak to this? Seeing none, Laura, we want to thank you very much for making the trip to North York.
Great.
And it was good timing. And we
I get to
appreciate.
stay in North Huron because I live here too,
Oh.
so that's great.
Well, I did
That's
see
my
the
trip.
I did see the Edgar, and I thought so. But I wasn't sure. Okay,
All right, thank you very much.
thank you very much. Right now, or is it later? We're gonna have Carson speak to the direction that we gave council before and see if the direction of council has changed, or if you wanna make a change tonight. So I'm just gonna let him step in now.
So, through your worship, so as council's aware, the Huron Shores ATV Club attended as a delegation in November, requesting that we consider a proposal to allow ATVs to enter into Wingham for food and fuel. The route was from in Morris Turnberry off Helena Street down Victoria to Scott Street, where Godfather's Pizza is, to allow them to cross the road to Pioneer gas station and all the food amenities there. The direction we received at the time was that staff be directed to research and investigate this further as it relates specifically to that proposal. In light of these legislations changes that are coming forward, where as Laura indicated, the onus would be flipped, and there would be and so basically council now has the ability to pass a bylaw which could permit it, which could prohibit it, or and in that bylaw you could prescribe a rate of speed. Also, as it relates to the specific proposal, or based on the legislative changes, is this something council would want to consider for the entire municipality? So I guess at this point, based on these legislative changes, we need direction on how to proceed, and whether that's to continue with the direction previously given, or wait out these legislative changes. The one thing to point out is they have this legislation has been given. It has passed, and there's just a proclamation date that is to be named. That date has not been named yet, so as Laura indicated, it could be any time when the changes would be in effect. So things for council to consider, and then if we don't receive direction, we'll just continue with the direction we previously received, I guess.
So I'm gonna open that up to council now on your thoughts, opinions, concerns. Where would you like to go with this? Go ahead, Kevin.
Through you, Carson. That bylaws, that's just strictly Wingham, or like, are we going to be required to set up a bylaw for North Huron?
Through your worship, so the bylaw, it would include whatever parameters council wanted to put around it, right? So if it was just a specific road, that bylaw would specify that the township would grant access on Victoria Street to Scott Street. If council, like other bylaws, for example, Howick, they passed a bylaw which allowed it in all lower tier municipal roads, right? The contents of that bylaw is ultimately up to council and what they want to regulate, how they want to regulate it.
My concern is just the ATV club that's presenting to come into Wingham doesn't represent the south end, or doesn't have representation in the south end as far as trails go.
Well, I'm gonna follow up on Kevin's concerns there, or thoughts or comments. I think we should make a North Huron-wide ATV bylaw instead of piecemealing it. One time, I think the staff should go back and include Blythe and East Wawanosh and Wingham wards and say, here's our bylaw and this is the speeds we'd like and this is where you can go, and that way we're gonna be sure we're gonna be away from the nursing homes and the hospitals. Go ahead, Kevin.
Just a rebuttal for that. Who's going to officiate that?
I was going to finish with that, saying now. I would presume it's going to be the staff, but should we involve BIAs?
No, I meant the.
Enforcement.
Oh, enforcement?
When I asked
Oh.
before, it was the club was going to do their own
Oh,
members.
okay.
If they don't include members or don't have any say in anywhere else, how are we going to have enforcement in those areas?
So that's something the staff could also look into, and Trevor may have an answer. He's patiently holding his hand here.
So with any other bylaw that would be enforceable under us, it would be bylaw enforcement. So, yes, any ATV club, if they want to self-police their members, they have, but there's nothing saying that anybody who self-police them, that they're gonna have any fines or anything like that. If it's a municipal bylaw, we as a municipality have the right to have a bylaw enforcement officer do what we need to have to provide the necessary fees and structures that would deter certain things. Now, in saying that, bylaw enforcement is done by complaint driven only. So, it's no different than any other bylaw that we would have. So it's going to be very difficult, in my mind, to enforce a bylaw that, if you're going to say you can only drive 20 kilometers an hour on a road, well, that's fine to say that, but unless you're going to have an OPP officer flagging them down or whatever, then the bylaw is going to be as enforceable as we have the parameters to enforce it. So I think staff needs to take into consideration what the proposal is being asked, not only from the club that has asked of council now, but what is legislation allowing us to do. And then in all honesty, I think the fact that it has bylaw enforcement written on it, maybe some conversation with the bylaw enforcement officer to say, what does this look like from your perspective? Like, is this something that has to become a discussion later on with regards to OPP, contract like all this stuff needs to be encompassing of a report, in my mind, that comes back to council and say, but I think the read is correct. I think in all honesty, it needs to be a municipally wide proposal, and the ATV club that came and provided direction, that was their request because they had no other choice but to come to get the request. Now the province has decided legislation to change that rule, so let's be forthcoming and try to work with the legislation on how it reads and make it fair so that we're not having to make significant changes once the legislation is fully passed and implemented.
Go ahead, Kevin.
For your, with the new legislation coming in, does that void the perception of having that one route into town? They can use every street coming into town?
I'm gonna pass that over to Carson.
Through you, your worship, the direction we previously received was to develop a bylaw that would just consider that route if, as Deputy Reeve Sipe and Reeve Bailey have indicated, if the direction that we received was to prepare a bylaw for all of North Huron, it would also incorporate that route. And
We wouldn't have to if we could use any road.
right, exactly. And through your worship, if you would be allowed to use any road, that would include Victoria to Scott Street, right? The other piece so staff have already started to pull together some of those considerations that Laura had mentioned in her presentation. So for example, Sean has provided his input for public works considerations. we've been in touch with bylaw enforcement. He's going to be providing his comments back, as well as county public works. But ultimately, what we need today is, while we're pulling this research together and a report will come back to council, a draft bylaw will have to be developed with this. Does council want us to develop a draft bylaw that looks at all of North Huron now with the new legislative changes, or does council want us to stick to the original proposal, which would be the Victoria Street, Scott Street route only?
Okay, I'm gonna open it up, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Reeve. Yeah, I think we should look at the whole municipality, and we should also, staff should also look at some of the other neighboring municipalities that are good with it and have bylaws. And, you know, there's no sense in reinventing things sometimes, just see what they've got and see if it makes sense. The biggest one would be the enforcement angle of it. But yeah, I think we should develop our own we should develop a bylaw for the whole municipality and then deal with it.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Trevor.
The one thing I do want to make sure and coordinate is that, yes, we want, at least what I'm hearing is that council would like to look at the entire municipality, but if staff have concerns about certain roads that should not be traveled on, that they should recommend that those not be.
Take them off. Yeah.
So not just that we're saying, you know, it's fine that we're incorporating all roads. I think the intention is that that staff recommend based on information they've got from all of the bylaw enforcement, public works, county, all that stuff, that they provide us the recommendation. If they recommend that it's okay to put them on all municipal roads, then so be it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, all that information needs to come with the potential recommendation to council as what they see as the appropriate action. And then if we want to kind of adhere to that or move away from that, then we have that right. But the fact that staff have a lot of this detail that we don't have, it's, in my mind, better that they provide the recommendation. And if we choose if even if they recommend that maybe Josephine Street wasn't a good idea and we allowed it, then that is our right as council to do that. But I think it's, in my mind, staff should be doing the recommendation because they're gonna have all the data and all the facts associated to the bylaw.
I'm gonna start with Anita and then you, Chris.
Yeah, we're talking about these bylaws, and I about this bylaw, and I don't think it can be enforced if our bylaw officer is somewhere else. He will never be in time to enforce any bylaw on the person who is not obeying to it. If I see the quad rules of the road, they're provincially regulated. Do we still, maybe we should add this road you can go on, but for the rest, I don't think we should do a bylaw because it's not enforceable.
Chris?
Yeah, Reeve, I think it would be appropriate to prohibit when you're say Wingham, there's roads that they should not be on. So, you know, we already know some roads that come in from the trailhead and they have good reason to come in. You know, that makes sense. But other roads, no, like our cottages up at Savile Beach, and they're everywhere. And it would probably be a wise thing if they prohibited some of the roads, you know. So yeah, I'm totally in favor of just having certain roads. Yes, that makes sense.
I'm just gonna follow up with that a bit. Way back when I was on council before, this came up. And the problem we ran, and the reason it came up is we had everybody running up and down all the streets. I was doing that. We had complaints coming in from the residents because middle of the night, the hospitals, the nursing home, and just older people, you know, at 8 o'clock at night, they're just getting to sleep and all of a sudden, meow! So we want to be very careful that we don't say all streets. And I think that would be for the staff to develop that with that understanding and talk with the bylaw enforcement officer and the ATV clubs and everybody else and get a good reckoning about what works for everyone, and so that we don't have to, again, keep bringing this back to the table.
Do we have something for snowmobiles or not?
That's what got me in trouble. Go ahead, Trevor.
No, but I think we have to understand, I think we have to understand is we've asked the staff to investigate a bylaw.
Yep.
If after all the detail comes back, if staff recommend that no bylaw to be prepared, because one, it can't be enforced, or two, it's not, makes sense, then that's the recommendation to council. And if we still choose to make them do a bylaw, then that is our right. But I think ultimately, like I said, we have all these thoughts and decisions. We don't have all the facts. I have no idea what Public Works have thought of it. I have no idea what Fire and Emergency Services have thought of it. I have no idea what the province has thought of it with regards to the law. So at the end of the day, in my mind, if we send it back to staff to do the recommendation based on the entire municipality, and if the staff come back with all the facts and say, based on all these facts, we don't recommend, or we do recommend a certain bylaw, then we can have a more fruitful discussion about what the bylaw is going to entail. Until then, we're just shooting from the hip, and it could mean nothing or everything.
So I'm hearing that we're all in favor of the staff to go ahead and look into this. I'm not sure, do we need a motion or just,
It's a little bad idea to put it in the motion.
we just
I'll
have-
move it, Dave.
And you got those two. All in favor? Carries. Paul, you were gonna say something?
Yes, I had a hand up there, you just missed it.
Sorry.
I just wanna make sure that we still have an empty spot in North Huron on their map. We'll be pronto on getting back from the staff. I know they already, by the sounds of it, a lot of the work done. So could we have this brought up before, in quick time, so they can get their map made out? And
What does staff feels, 6 months?
Through your worship, ultimately, this request is, as council will be aware, is not in the strategic plan. Council could, if council feels this is a priority, we can prioritize it, but based on our current workloads now, staff have developed their work plans based on what's in the strategic plan. And I don't know, Wayne, if you want to.
So, go ahead, Paul.
could we look at what they asked for on that short trail, the 3 blocks? So could we not look at that to
So-
speed that on?
Just with council's permission, can I just ask the folks that are sitting over in the corner, you've heard what's going on, the concerns, everything doesn't move as fast as the public would like it to, because anybody in business will understand what I just said. Are you okay if we search the whole thing out? I know you'd like it tomorrow, but reality is we are moving in your direction for you. How do you feel?
Well, I just want the council to be aware that, with ATV use on the roads, when it comes to policing for speed, so if you're in excess of the known speed limits inside the town boundaries of 20 kilometers an hour, that falls on your driver's license as a provincial offense, and it's monitored through the demerit point system under the Highway Traffic Act. So there's that to consider. The other point that Laura, I believe, made about the dirt bikes was that there are very special stipulations to do with dirt bikes. It is not your off-road dirt bike that they take to Walton Racetrack and tear around on the track with that. It is a bike that has blinkers, it has headlights, it has on-road, off-road tires. It is registered as an on-road, off-road motorcycle. So
Yeah.
there's some things to consider there.
Yeah, but where I was kind of going with that is just the understanding of that we're moving towards this, but our staff, everything has to line up in a queue to get there. We just want you to know that the council is in favor of this, but it may not be ready for spring.
Understood.
Anita?
But if this legislation passes, then
Doesn't really matter anyway. You can go
it
wherever you
doesn't
want.
matter at all.
But that, and,
Yeah,
and
then
that's,
it's reaching.
and that's where at the end of the day, if you had the legislation in place that told us, stay away from the hospital, stay away from the schools, stay
Yeah.
away from those critical areas,
Yeah.
That's a
then it's already in place before legislation takes effect. You've got a game plan
Yeah.
to control it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Thank you very much. Is everybody good with that? Okay, I think I have a motion on the floor, didn't I?
It already carried.
Oh, it already carried. Okay, thanks, guys. Okay, 6.2, 6.2.1. So we're gonna go to a public meeting, public code and act fees and charges. The purpose of the meeting is for the council of Township of North Huron to consult with the public on the proposed amendments to building classes and fees under Schedule C of the North Huron Fees and Charges Bylaw. 6.2.2 requirement of the public meeting. This public meeting is being held under the Building Code Act, which requires that council hold at least one public meeting and the proper notice be given to the intent to consider a bylaw to amend the fee schedule for services rendered under the Building Code Act. 6.2.3, process notice of the process is the notice of the public meeting was issued in accordance with the section 7 6 of the Building Code Act and the North Huron Procedural Bylaw on January 8th and 9th, 2020. We're gonna look for comments, so I'm gonna have Kirk speak to it first of all. Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you, Gary. Back in December 16, 2019, at the regular council meeting, I did have a report before council which really detailed the history of the building permit fees, how they were established in 2017. At that time there, past council did vote in favor of increasing the fees. So a bit of history was provided with council. Subsequent review of the fees has been undertaken, and attached with your report tonight is a spreadsheet indicating what all of the fees are with the neighboring municipalities, Huron County, Bruce County, and Wellington County. The fees have not been increased since 2017. As presented earlier to council this year, the building department has run a substantial deficit over the last 5 years of approximately $250,000. This deficit has been offset by general taxation, where it should be offset by the actual permit holders. The attached spreadsheet shows the proposed 2020 fees in relation to your current fees for North Huron and other area municipalities. It's important to note that the proposed fee increases only affect the square footage area and not the base fee. If the proposed fees are adopted by council, this will align you with the neighboring municipality, which is Morris Turnberry. Your neighboring municipality to the north, South Bruce, is very close, in line with the fee structure as well. You'll see on the attached spreadsheet that all the fees are not identical when you look from municipality to municipality. That summarizes my report before council, but I'll certainly attempt to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Kirk. At this point, we're gonna ask if there's anybody in the public who would like to comment on the bylaws that we're discussing, and since you're the only one here, apparently not. Okay, now we're gonna go to council. Questions and comments, concerns. Floor is open. Go ahead, Paul.
I think it's prudent that we go this route, just for the money, try and get a bit money neutral. I
Yeah.
appreciate the work Kirk did on that.
Anyone else? Not seeing anyone. We're gonna go to 6.2.5, that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the Chief Building Official dated February 3rd, 2020, regarding the Public Department's proposal fees for 2020 for information purposes. And further, the council approves the proposed fee changes to Schedule C, Building Class and Fees of Bylaw 117-2019, being a bylaw to establish fees and charges for the Township of North Huron. And further, the council gives the first and second reading of the bylaw number 1220, being a bylaw to amend Schedule C, Building Classes and Fees of Bylaws 117-2019 at the February 3rd, 2020 regular council meeting, and the third reading bylaw number 12/2020 at the February 18th regular council meeting. So we're just doing first and second reading, giving the public time to come and discuss this with us if they have any issues. Do I have a mover? Nita and Paul seconds. Questions or comments? Last chance. Seeing none, I call the vote. All in favor? Carries. We have the clerk's report, 7.1.1, the consent agenda for Scott's, and we're gonna have Monica come up. Sorry, Monica.
No worries. So this is a application for severance. It's a surplus farm residence severance. The applicants are Melissa and Kevin Scott, and Melissa is in attendance here tonight. The address of the property is 39370 Nature Center Road. It's on part of Lot 36, Concession 7 in East Wawanosh. It's a surplus farm dwelling severance. The proposal is to sever approximately 2.5 acres containing a house. The area retained will be approximately 100 acres. The zoning of the property is AG1 and NE2 in the areas of natural environment, and it's designated agriculture and natural environment in the official plan. So on the slide that I have up here, you can see the location of the proposed severance for the surplus farm residence outlined in blue. There's a long driveway and the house is up beyond the hill. And there is some natural environment at the back of the property that won't at all be affected by the severance. So this slide just shows a little bit closer up the proposed severed lands. One of the unique things about this property is there's an old schoolhouse that's not in use at all on the retained lands, and that building won't be impacted by the severance either. So the house, folks might be familiar with this stately stone house. This is the property to be severed, and this slide shows the proposed retained parcel. The top picture, you can see the old schoolhouse. It will remain on the retained lands. The retained parcel already has an entrance for the field out on Scott Road. Scott Road. Line, thank you. So it is our department's recommendation that the application for severance be recommended with the recommended conditions in my report.
Okay, so I have a motion in front of me that the council of the Township of North Huron hereby recommend approval for the consent application file number C88-19. Owner applicant Melissa and Kevin Scott, property description East Part Lot 36, Concession 7, East Wawanosh Ward, Township of North Huron, with the conditions set out by the Huron County Planner and Development Report presented by Monica Walker-Bolton at the February 3rd, 2020 council meeting. Do I have a mover? I have Rick. Do I have a seconder? I have Paul. Questions or comments, concerns from the council? Go ahead, Chris.
It's just disturbing that it's a flagpole, which means there's, well, you can just look at the shape, that's where the name comes from. And, you know, we've talked about it, Monica, and you have to deal with it, so do we. It would be nice if there was a little bit more property. Like, I'd be happier if there was a little bit, another acre or two, so the prospective owner, the new owner, I suppose, if that, I'm not sure, Melissa, if you're staying there or new people.
Kevin's keeping the house and the severed property, the retained land, I guess.
Okay.
So the house would be kept and then the retained land would be sold to a farmer?
Sorry, I must have it
Yeah.
backwards.
So
Yeah.
it's in my report, the retained land is the big piece, is to be sold to a farmer for whom the surplus house is
I gotcha.
surplus to his
I
needs.
gotcha. Anyways, that's something, and I'm gonna bring it up every time, because I don't like flagpoles. Like, you know, Kevin gonna be there, that's great, it's a little grand house, I'm glad he's gonna be there. But under normal circumstances, or even this time, if there's a little bit more land, then the new owner way down the road can do something. You know, have a couple of horses, have whatever, big garden. And we need to keep thinking in those terms, Monica, that just a little bit more gives more options. Because once it's done, it's done.
Anita.
That is true, but I still think it's the landowner that makes the decision what he wants to sever or not.
Yeah, but we prove it or not.
Okay. You guys? Go ahead, Trev.
Yeah, you know, I think we all have a good, both counselors have have different opinion about who should have responsibility to make the severance. Ultimately, the person who's the applicant has the determination of what land they want or don't want. What Councillor Palmer is suggesting is that, how do we know in 25 years or 50 years down the road that if that potential person sells, that the new owner might not want more land? There's nothing stopping him from trying to get land from the retained people. There's nothing stopping him from doing that. If he can try to get some land bought or sold from the person who's retained that land, that's their choice. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we should not be in the business to dictate to taxpayers or ratepayers about what they want to keep as their property. It is not I would definitely not want somebody telling me what I have to keep as my property as a counselor. It's not my right. It's not my right to know what you want. If you want to keep just this, God bless. If you don't, if you want 100 acres or 10 acres, if it fits the zoning bylaw and fix the change, then I think we have to be acceptable of that. There is options available to people after the severance is done that they can make different claims to do different things. So I think we can't just pigeonhole everything into, you don't want to see a flagpole severance, but the people who are doing these are choosing to do them for a reason, and if that's their choice, that's their choice.
Okay, moving it along. Anybody else like to speak to it? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries.
Okay. So with that, it hasn't had any objections from neighbors or any issues with the Planning Act or the North Huron official plan. So this is proceeding as an undisputed consent. So the next step will be to the planning director for her signature and approval.
Okay. Thank you very much, Monica.
Thank you. I'll just put it.
So, you want to speak to it first, Chris? Or I'll get back there. Chris. Oh, there it is. Put that in there. You want that in the audience? Okay. 7.1.2, that the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the clerk dated February 3rd, 2020 regarding statutory officer appointment bylaws for information purposes. And further, that council hereby approves the job description for the administrative assistant / deputy clerk position. And further, that council will hereby appoint Barbara Black as the administrative assistant / deputy clerk for the Township of North Huron. And further, that the council hereby appoints the clerk administrative assistant / deputy clerk and public works department administration assistants as lottery licensing officers for the Township of North Huron. And further, that council deems the adoption of bylaw number 14-2020 being a bylaw to appoint the administrative assistant's deputy clerk for the Township of North Huron. And the bylaw number 15-2020 bylaw, being a bylaw to appoint the lottery license officer for the Township of North Huron to be administrative and approves an exception to the section 19.1 of the procedural bylaw to allow for the passing of bylaw number 14-2020 and 15-2020 at the February 3rd, 2020 regular council meeting. Can I have a mover and a seconder, and we'll talk about this. I have Paul moving, I have Rick seconding, it's open. Oh, I'm gonna actually have Carson speak to this first, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as council is aware, in July of 2018, the former clerk resigned. And to address the vacancy that occurred at the time, council reappointed existing staff as a temporary solution due to the fact that the council at the time was in lame duck. And then early into the term of this council's office, council authorized and filled the clerk's vacancy. So now, because of this temporary transition period, there are 2 statutory appointments that need to be made in regard to staffing for the clerk's department. And these statutory appointments are the administrative assistant, deputy clerk position, and then lottery license officers. So I'll talk about each of them individually. So start with the administrative assistant deputy clerk position. Deputy clerk is a statutory officer position, so as a result, council appoints the statutory officers by bylaw. As council will be aware, on December 2nd of 2019, council met in closed session to discuss matters that impacted identifiable individuals. In closed session, council directed staff to prepare a job description for an administrative assistant / deputy clerk position. And this job description that was developed by staff is attached to the staff report, and outlines the current duties that are being performed by the position since the resignation of the former clerk and manager of IT that occurred in July of 2018. And so the approval of this job description will formalize the work that's being done by that position. And so it's just important to note that the approval of this job description would not create any new positions within the township, and this position would not result in any pay grid movements. Ultimately, it's just formalizing the duties that are already being performed by the employee. As for the second statutory officer appointment, so that's the lottery licensing officers. The role is traditionally performed by the clerk's department and has been in the past. However, due to the resignation that occurred in July of 2018, council authorized for this role to be dispersed across different staff within the municipality due to their inability to appoint officers since they were in lame duck. And so at this point in time, staff are desirous of focusing the lottery licensing officer position back within the clerk's department. So it's suggested that council appoint the clerk as a lottery licensing officer in the township, and then if council is desirous of also establishing the administrative assistant deputy clerk position that I described, it would be prudent to reflect that in the appointment bylaw for the lottery licensed officer as well. And then finally, because of the transition period, it was the Public Works Department admin assistant who took on the bulk of lottery licenses. So as a result, she is trained in lottery licenses. So staff are suggesting that for continued customer service purposes and the fact that she's already trained, she still be granted the authority to perform this function under the bylaw if there was a time when the clerk and deputy clerk are absent. In essence, this just allows her to maintain the ability to do so since she's trained, but it's important to point out that she would not be the primary person. That would be myself as the clerk, or the deputy clerk as my designate. So yeah, I guess if there's any questions on that, that's all.
Yes, throwing it out to council. Questions, concerns, comments? Kevin?
Was it the desire that originally when we started looking for a full-time clerk, was the original purpose to keep and fill both those positions? Or I know we're making an amendment to this, but originally was the looking for full-time to add to staff, or to just augment what we had?
I'm gonna have to maybe pass that over to Dwayne or Trevor. They would have been there at the time. I don't have an answer for you unless somebody does have an answer. Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, the intention of it was at the time was we were hiring a full-time clerk, and you would still need a deputy clerk. But the deputy clerk at the time was not to be, in essence, potentially was not to be the CAO. That was originally at the time discussion, because the CAO had their plate of work, and the intention was you're gonna have a clerk, and then you would potentially have a deputy clerk in the case where the clerk goes away on vacation or whatever. You have to have a clerk available for other reasons. So that was the intention at the original time. The staff that's doing the work today was the intention of the person at that time they were to be doing it.
Okay.
Is the deputy clerk fully certified to do anything when the clerk's away?
Again, I'm gonna throw that out to Trevor.
So what the deputy clerk is doing today is we have been provided before when we put her in the role, she was able to do that, the tasks that she was asked to do. She is certified to do those tasks and only those tasks. There's lots of tasks within the clerk's role that are legislated that you have to have training of what to do, but she was not doing those tasks at that point. Those tasks at the point before we hired a full-time clerk were being done by the CAO.
And the part-time we hired on.
Right,
Yeah.
and the one that we had on contract through the election.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none. I call the motion. Everybody in favor? Carries. Thank you. Finance Department, we have nothing tonight. Rec, we have something. Vicky's up on 7.3.1, that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receive the report prepared by the Director of Recreation and Community Services dated February 3rd, 2020 regarding a comprehensive tree and bench program for information purposes. And further, that Council directs the clerk to prepare a bylaw adopting the commemorative tree and bylaw policy, bench policy, as presented for the February 18th, 2020 regular meeting of council consideration. Can I have a mover for that?
I'll move for discussion.
Okay, Trevor and Kevin seconded. Vicky, your turn.
Thank you, Your Worship. As indicated in the report over the past few years, the township has received several requests from members of the public to have a tree planted on municipal land in memory of a loved one. Given the level of interest, staff began to research how the municipalities dealt with these types of requests. In our research, we found that numerous municipalities across Canada allow commemorations by way of a tree and bench program / policy. The tree and bench programs are offered on a cost recovery basis so that there's no impact to taxation. The program allows individuals, families, and or community groups to commemorate a loved one or celebrate an event or mark a memorable occasion. Based on the information gathered, staff have developed a draft policy for council's consideration. The policy explains the purpose of the policy, identifies the roles and responsibilities of the departments involved, maintenance standards, etc. The policy also indicates that those wishing to make a contribution would be required to complete an application form and then work with staff to select the commemorative item and location that it would be installed. The staff feel the tree and bench program would have a positive impact on the community as it allows and promotes improved aesthetics to parkland and other municipal facilities, which are enjoyed by other members of the public, but also allows individuals, families, and groups the opportunity to provide a lasting tribute in their loved one's memory or in celebration
Thank you.
of an event.
Thank you, Vicky. I'm going to open it up to council for Trev. Did you want to start off?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess I have a comment and a question. I think it's a great idea that we have this program. The question that I have is, what about a lot of the stuff with regards to this program was because of the last year or so when people have been asking for this type of stuff. So when we were putting in doing the investigation with those individuals, are those then grandfathered away from this policy? Because I'm assuming they picked their own whatever, or did they follow this policy without, how did that work?
Through Your Worship, those requests were not fulfilled.
They have not been fulfilled
No,
as
they
of yet?
have not. We did not have a policy in place to fulfill them.
And actually, Trev, I know the lineup goes back 3 years for people who would like to do this. It was a situation where and I could touch on this on a personal basis. So it's a situation where if you're just allowing to do that, 20 years from now, nobody knows where the tree or the plaque was. I took my 80-year-old mother up to Milton and Prince Edward County, and she couldn't find her mom or her grandma. and it was heartbreaking to go through that, where if it was registered properly and taken care of, I could've went somewhere, found out where it wasn't and located that while we were in the area. So I think that's the biggest thing, is to be able to say, we know where that is as time moves by. And it's taken care of property, and we can watch it for vandalism. I will throw it back out to the council for further conversation. Seeing none, oh, Paul, go ahead.
This will be completely cost recovery then, I take it?
Yes. Yes.
Through you, your worship, yes, it would. And just to give a different spin there, we talked about, you know, a tree or bench being installed in place, or in memory of a loved one, but it doesn't, in terms of community groups and things, they could be celebrating their 50th anniversary and they wanna have a tree planted. That's another way of, another type of commemoration, or it could be for Earth Day. The policy allows for those types of things to occur, so it's not strictly in memory of a loved one, there's other ways of doing it.
Questions or comments anymore? Anything from anyone?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So, we talk about cost recovery and we talk about maintenance in the plan. I don't quite understand, it says North Huron's gonna do their best to management for ensure commemorative are properly maintained. Well, if we're maintaining them, who's paying for that? Taxation, in my mind, or how is that cost recovered?
I'm gonna presume, and Sean, I'm gonna presume we're clean, do you wanna do it, Vicky? I'm gonna presume we're cleaning the area, cutting the grass and everything anyway. Go ahead.
Through you, your worship, and Sean can jump in if needed. But we would not be maintaining it beyond anything that we would normally do for another tree or bench. We are looking at putting out a RFP or tender for the provision of trees for this purpose. So we would be recuperating the costs, and then the item would be warranted under that term. Other than that, it's very minimal maintenance, and it could be even involve, you know, if we have a bench that may be in poor condition, that we could be replacing that bench with a newly donated one that's been contributed toward, and things like that. So it's not that it's necessarily a new item in the park. It could be, it may not be, it just depends.
Forgive me, I think somebody else had their hand up. Was it you, Kevin? Who was it? Oh, sorry, Chris. I knew somebody did. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think it's a great idea. You know, as we get older, we're closer to utilizing
Being a bench?
Yeah, being a bench. And you think about it, why not, you know? And yeah, there certainly would have to be limitation. It can't just be willy-nilly and everybody just gets a bench. There has to be, you know, protocols and what have you.
Thank you. Trevor, you want to speak?
Yeah, the only other question I had was in regards to replacement. So you had mentioned a conversation about replacement. So if a tree or a bench is in disrepair, is it the municipality's responsibility to contact the owner of the bench to remove it, or what's the process in which the municipality will have to deal with that?
Through you, your worship, if the tree has died and it's outside of the maintenance period or warranty period, then it would be removed.
But is it removed with the permission of the people who have requested to put it there, or are we just removing it? Because my concern is, go ahead.
Through your worship, we would just be removing it. We could certainly notify that individual or individuals of the situation, but we would be removing it. One of the things that's stated in the policy is that once that item is donated, it becomes, or contributed toward it, because it is the property of the municipality. There is no ownership there. It becomes the property of the municipality. It will be maintained to municipal standards.
I have no problem with that. I just know when you talk about commemorative. People put ownership in, and it becomes a very an emotional attachment to their loved one or their specific reason why they want it. And if the municipality, and in my mind, I think what would solve a lot of this is in the application process that is clearly stated and communicated to the person who is signing that application that says, if this potentially is outside the warranty period and it becomes damaged or whatever the case may be, that this will be removed with may or may not be without you knowing. So just so they're clear about what the process is, because I do not want to get emails or problems with a process as it relates to somebody's commemorating something that's very valuable, very emotional to them, because it tends to be a very emotional thing. I don't want to seem like it's frivolous, but I think we need to understand that from a council perspective and a policy, because it could just blow up in staff's face and council's face. We're trying to do a good thing here, and communication tends to bury a lot of things in the world.
Okay, Beth?
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. 7.4.1, the Wingham Armories Building Condition Assessment. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Director of Public Works dated February 3rd, 2020 regarding the building condition assessment of the Wingham Armories Building for information. And further, the council provides direction to staff regarding the future of the Wingham Armories Building. Do I have a mover? I have Paul. I have Kevin seconding. Thank you. Sean, do you want to speak to this, please?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So as council's aware, staff was directed to complete a building condition assessment on the Wingham Armories building. We had Capital Management Engineering Incorporated visit the Armories. They were in here November 18th of 2019 to look at the facility. And of course, the exercise was completed to give council a solid idea of what they had in terms of an asset there, as it pertains to making decisions surrounding its future. And of course, any building condition assessment is a valuable tool for staff as well for the purpose of long-term capital planning. So the BCA itself considers all facets of not just this facility, but any facility, and that includes the site itself, the exterior and interior conditions of the building, looks at mechanical, looks at electrical, looks at HVAC, and looks at plumbing. I should point out though that these things are non-invasive, so they're not opening walls, they're not, taking anything apart or disassembling to assess. It's all a visual based on the identified condition at the time of the visit, as well as any data they can find and any knowledge they have on particular systems. So they'll look at a heating system, understand its age, its typical duty cycle, and they can make an evaluation based on that. Through this particular process, it was determined that the building was in poor condition with a facility condition index of 25%. That's outlined in the attached BCA, but basically 0 to 5% is good. I believe it's 5 to 10 is getting a little rough, and then anything over 10% is in what's considered poor condition. And again, that's identified in the attached building condition assessment. Based on the information found in that assessment that's attached, and through discussion with capital management, they estimate that the cost associated with restoring the facility just to a usable shell is approximately $158,000, with costs that could blossom to in excess of $570,000 if it were to be repurposed as, say, a functioning AODA compliant office facility. So your range is between that 160 and 570 to start, and that's your first 5 years. So a little bit of background. The building itself was originally constructed in or around 1910. Underwent very extensive renovations in 1970 where the addition was added on. One of the issues with the building is through its 110-year life, it's been updated and upgraded numerous times through the ages using different materials, different approaches to construction, different standards. So that made it very interesting when they were going through and having a look at the building. The attached report, which really goes into the fine detail, in this report here, I don't go into all the detail on interior, exterior, finishes, that sort of thing. It is all in the attached report. But basically the conclusion was this, this is to quote Capital Management. They said, in conclusion, although the building is noted to be a heritage building, the current condition and required investment to sustain or to suitably repurpose the building will likely result in being cost prohibitive. What makes that interesting is before Torkel Duncan, who was the engineer that did the inspection, started the inspection, he says it's a very old building, but typically these processes tend to save buildings that people didn't think could be saved. When he came out of the inspection, he said, there's been so many additions, add-ons, changes to the electrical, to the plumbing, to the structure itself. He said this is not a case where he was recommending that it was a good building block, and that's why that report is there. So just briefly, I'd like to go through when we last spoke. There was a number of proposals or suggested options that were brought to council. So if it pleases council, I'll quickly go through them. The first option was do nothing with the facility. Again, this involves just decommissioning it until such time as council decides to do something with the building. And really with this one, the short-term costs are limited to approximately about $8,300 a year just to keep minimum services, insurance, a little bit of hydro, a little bit of heat. The big thing that isn't mentioned here but was noted last time is buildings don't tend to get better with time when they're closed down. So decommissioning it and letting it idle is typically going to cause some further degeneration of the structure. Next option was rental or lease of the building in part or in whole to an external entity, whoever that might be. This course of action will require a lease agreement and will place the township into the role of landlord for the facility. Again, now this starts defaulting into those minimum 5-year capital repair costs. So you're looking at about $153,000 over the next 5 years, and that includes repointing the brick that everybody can see is starting to fail fairly notably. There's some minimum work in the building that would be required over the 5 years to keep it functional. So you're really looking at somewhere in that neighborhood of just under $160,000. Next option, repurposing of the facility for municipal purposes. We looked at this as staff with particular interest. One of the things that was discussed in meeting with Capital Management was the possibility of using it as administrative offices, AODA compliant, single level offices. That's where this $570,000 price tag came in, to actually, because of the numerous ages of construction and the poor condition of a lot of the different systems that are identified again in the report, it started very quickly looking cost prohibitive to turn it into an office complex. It looks easy at first pass, and you said there's just a terrible amount of work associated. And then you default to the other side if we're going to look at it as a storage facility. You're still into that $158,000. There's a zero missing there. You're looking at that $158,000 price tag for the repointing of the brick for the interior work. Sale of the facility. Council can consider severance and sale of the property. All other things notwithstanding, we have to remember that all of the power for this building originates in that building. So we did bring the electricians in to have a look at it. We brought all the contractors that would be required in getting the electrical service and the generator transfer switch out of there. And this is actually a fairly tight price. We were looking at about $26,260 to sever the two buildings.
Sean, can I just ask, do you have that backwards where the hydro's in the big building and we're not gonna have it in the?
I
Tell me-
sincerely
tell-
wish I did have it backwards. I can assure you I do not. No, so we're looking at a $26,000 price tag to sever the two buildings.
Makes perfect sense.
It can't all be good news. And then finally, the last option we looked at here was demolition of the facility. The building could be demolished. That area could certainly be converted to municipal parking or sold for other purposes. If one of the discussions we had at the staff level is if it was demolished and paved, we could look at that area for the installation of user pay electrical charging stations, as was discussed in the strategic planning process. But really, that could only be entertained, of course, after we went through a de-designation process, which is laid out in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. Price tag for demo, including the electrical work that we just discussed, is about $72,000. That includes the severing of the electrical, demolishing and removal of the building, and then paving, and there is a bit of a contingency in there. And then as far as the last piece really is future considerations. As council's aware, staff has certainly been looking at whatever options we could come up with to deal with what we're seeing in terms of a an ongoing shortage of usable administrative space within this building. As council's aware, we're putting people in the council. We're all over the place here. Staff looked at the Wingham Armories building, and based on the outcome of this, we don't think that the building provides any usable, workable solutions that aren't cost prohibitive.
I'm gonna open it up to council. What I just said quietly was it just keeps getting better.
I know.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Through your, there's been some changes to the payments now out for the court security and such that these chambers were at one time the court. I don't know whether it would be cost effective, but could a court be relocated to help offset costs in that facility? Just furthering going on, that some of the meetings that we've had here, we've had to have the council meetings in other larger facilities. Well, that might be a possible municipal council chambers, and using this as more office for the town staff.
Sean's gonna answer part of that.
Thank you. First, the court piece, as council may recall, that was not a moneymaker. I can't remember the exact number. It was under $2,000. Yeah, it was a very, very small amount of money, so really not much in terms of offsetting an opportunity there. And then second off, the use of that facility as a council chambers would start pushing back into that $570,000 piece. Now, the minimum, if you were looking at just keeping the shell and keeping the structure sound, should be careful with that word. There's no imminent risk or anything like that, but staying ahead of the degeneration of the building, you're looking at about that $160,000. Anything beyond using it as a storage facility will start adding costs as you retrofit. I'm sure chief building official could speak to some of the requirements surrounding converting the building over to that type of occupancy. And I expect that there'd be quite a few changes required.
We already had jail cells there.
For the counselors that are bad. Go ahead, Anita.
Sean, do you have any idea how long a what is it?
The heritage part?
Yeah, how long that'll take? That
There's a, through you, your worship, there is a public consultation and input period, so I don't have the exact numbers, but it's a fairly extended period of time, so
So
it's.
a couple of years or?
No, it's inside of the calendar year, but it's
Okay.
a number of months that there's a advertising process, there's the appeal period, and then the filing.
Okay, and for the electrical that is there, can it be in a separate little building then, or do you have to bring it to this building?
Through you, your worship, if we were going to do anything with it, really your costs are not gonna, if anything, it might be even a little bit more expensive to separate it into its own building. The idea was that we would just get it back into this, into here where it belongs, and there is space for it
To
downstairs.
do that, okay.
Go ahead, Paul.
Just curious, how is our parking? Do we have lots of parking? For downtown, just a question.
Through you, Reed,
Yeah.
that parking's always a valuable commodity in my opinion. I think oftentimes you see this parking lot full, even with the police services moved, those spots are often full.
I know.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know it comes up on theater night that there's a lot of complaints that gotta park so far away, which is good, it means they got a few people, but I mean, I guess 72,000, and that includes, I'll put the electricity in here,
Yes, that's correct.
and then could have a parking lot after it's decommissioned as a heritage building.
Correct.
Kevin?
I would favor either, seeing first, being the least cost to the municipality is seeing if someone would want to purchase it, buy the building like that. Second, I would put my thoughts in favor of parking for the theater. I think if they're gonna go ahead and have more and more shows, which I think they do want to have, parking for them is, my own theater, parking is essential. With the parking.
Trevor?
I think we have to be careful when we say parking. And the only reason I say this is because we have municipal parking lots today that are being used by tenants in buildings that are above commercial buildings right now. So they're using the space because that's the only place they have the ability to park. And it's taking away from parking for store owners and a whole bunch of other. The parking dilemma in this municipality is no different than any parking dilemma in any municipality that I'm aware of. And it really becomes a discussion about municipally owned parking versus parking who owns it for another reason. And I think the discussion is that, yeah, the intention of us to say, yeah, it's great for parking for the theater. Well, the minute that, I guarantee, the minute you open those spaces up, they will be used and they potentially could not be used for the purposes of the theater. They could be used for anybody. It could be, now they're closer to walking distance for their residents that they're not able to get a parking spot now. So I think we have to be careful about what the utilization of that parking is meant for. But I think ultimately, in my mind, we're going down the discussion about creating this building as surplus. I don't think this building is of any value to the municipality as it is, and actually it's just a hindrance in my mind, and my, I mentioned this prior to the OPP transition. I said that building probably should not be available after this because it would just it'll just open itself up for more stuff to get stored somewhere where we don't need to store it. So I'm in favor of discussions about creating its surplus, and if we can get a buyer that wants it, great. If they don't, then we go down in my mind, we go down the whole of demolition and discuss, and I think we also have to understand, once it's demolished and it's put into that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a parking lot forever, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be a parking lot forever. If we still maintain control of it, but it's a municipal parking lot, if at any time we want to build an administrative building for whatever purpose, then and then I suspect we would get more bang for our buck building something from what we actually need versus trying to pigeonhole 570,000, which will turn into 750,000, to make it work. So that is my comments. I just don't think it's valuable, but I really do think that us going through the surplus is the way to go.
Paul?
Yes, I'm just curious if Sean could answer to you, Reeve. How much, if it was sold, as was mentioned, if it was sold, how much parking goes with that building, like all along there, the length of a car pulled in? Just curious.
Well, through you, Reeve, I think that would be part of the severance process. I would expect that would have to be worked out internally.
Thank you, Sean. Anyone else? I'm gonna say a few things. I think the proper way to go would be to, first of all, we've gotta go through the heritage designation, and see what the public thinks. At the same time, I think the sale would be the proper way to go, and if the sale can't, take place as, Deputy Sykes said, we should look at parking lot, but I would also be in favor of chargers too, but not free chargers, where you have to pay with a card for a little bit of payback, but that would be a conversation down the road. Just want to mention one other thing on this topic. The staff is working on a dozen things at once. And we have absolutely no housing in North Huron. We have, especially the Wingham Ward, and we have a lack of 100 employees at our industrial complex at the other end of town. So we are starving for employees. So the town thought, you know something, if the police services used this all that time, why couldn't we just turn it in? They thought maybe we could get 12 rooms out of it because we have what we call the newcomers coming into North Huron here, and they're literally right from Pakistan or India. They land in London and they come here to work at the factories here, and it's working well for us. It's part of the acute shortage labor shortage group that's working on that. So here we are thinking, we have this building, the police were in it all that time. Why wouldn't we just help everybody else by making rental buildings out of this and a communal spot in the middle for everybody to be there when they're not working? But do you guys always hear about the upper government and all the stuff they tell you gotta do that just drives everybody nuts? Well, this is one of them. Because we have police in here a month ago, but according to Ontario regulations, if we put the newcomers in there, we have to switch the designation, which ended up being $500,000 by the time you did all. Isn't that amazing? But somebody was using it, and that's the part where you hear the Reeves and the mayors all yelling at the upper tier governments. Come on, guys. Let's give her a head of shakes. But anyway, I thought you guys would enjoy that story, so we're not using it for the newcomers. So if I'm not hearing anything further, I'm going to think that we're going to ask staff to look into putting first of all, making it a surplus property, putting it up for sale, and then we'll go from there. And we'll put a time limit on the sale, I would presume. We're good with that?
So you had, Paul was the mover of the original motion and Kevin seconded it. That just said to provide staff direction, so.
Oh, that works too, doesn't it?
Right, well, we actually need the direction,
So why don't we, my suggestion, sorry, Reeve, would be to take a motion, or take the approval of that motion.
Yeah.
And then after that, we would then make another secondary motion that indicates what the direction would be.
Absolutely, all in favor? Carries. Would somebody like to make a motion? Go, Trev.
Yeah, so I will make the motion to declare the Wingham Armories building surplus, or at least go through the process of declaring it surplus, for the purposes of one, sale of the facility, and then if sale is no longer available, or if this council wishes to not do that, then we would deem the demolition potentially, based on the discussion that we have removed the heritage designation and went through that process.
Do I have a seconder? I have Rick. Oh, wait. I'll give you a break. We're just waiting him to catch up.
declare,
So my motion is to declare, to look at declaring the property surplus for the intention of sale. So ultimately, at the end of the day, that communication will come back to council to say is here's what we're gonna sell it for if we wanna sell it. And council then determine if they don't wanna sell it for that price, then they can move to go to demolition, going through the process. Either way, we still have to have potentially the discussion about removing the heritage part.
And that may be a public meeting, I don't, we'll have to look into that.
I'm
I've never
assuming the
done it.
heritage start will be a public meeting, I
Yeah.
guess.
So,
Does that make was I clear? Does that make sense, Carson?
Should there be a time limit
Did you
on?
want me to?
We can't put a time limit on it, cause the time limit will based on, time
heritage,
limit will be based on the heritage.
yeah. that's
True,
right,
but we
too.
can't wait forever to let it sell once it's been deemed, you
Well,
know,
the
surplus. You have to be careful, unless we can just jump in at any time and say, okay, end of the day.
Well,
let's-
the
let's put it
deeming of
down.
property surplus provides you have to do certain things, which means you have to get a valuation of what the property is worth, and then go from there. There's circumstances that the staff have to do with regards to regulation in determining a surplus property. So those parts will happen, and that stuff will come back to council for determination about what we wanna put on it out for market.
Okay.
So that, the staff will take care of that, guys. Carson's gonna read this back so we all know the actual motion.
That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby directs staff to begin the process to declare the former Wingham Armories building surplus for the intention of selling the property. And further that if there is not a suitable buyer, then council will go through the process to demolish the building. And further that council directs staff to begin the process to remove the heritage designation.
We have a mover and we have a seconder, I believe. Chris is gonna second it. Okay. Questions, comments, or concerns? Go ahead. Anita.
Would the heritage destination be of importance for a potential buyer or not?
It could be, a lot of people do like the older buildings, like the
So
lawyers
do
or
we
somebody.
want to keep that out of it? Do that later? See
It
if there
takes,
is,
it takes 6 to 8 months and we can stop it at any time. If we don't have the building sold by then, we all know where it is. Okay.
Yep.
That, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak out of turn, but I presume that's what we were all thinking. Yeah, we can stop that at any time, and staff will let us know if I'm wrong on that. Okay. Anyone else? Seeing no more, all in favor? Carries. Yes.
Did want to mention that after that motion, we do have we have had requests. We have had a request from the cadets as it relates to that building. So I think it would be important that we communicate where we are with regards to that building and any potential solutions that we may come up with as to what their needs are. Their needs are for storage of their uniforms and a whole bunch of other things, I think. So if there's some things that we can communicate back to them based on this process, and maybe some possible solutions to them, for them, then, as it relates to municipal buildings, then potentially I think I think it's an appropriate way at least to communicate that we've made this direction and that they are aware that we've made this direction and not, just that the fact is that we think that's not important to do. We're not just leaving you hanging. We'll work with you to try to figure out another solution, but that solution wasn't the way we wanted to go.
Could we just do that as direction, or do you wanna, direction it is?
That's
Okay, so
fine.
we're gonna have staff as direction. Okay. Next is 7.5.1. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the fire chief dated February 3rd, 2020 regarding a draft cost recovery bylaw fire specific for information purposes. And further, that the council directs the clerk to finalize and bring forward a bylaw regarding the fire specific cost recovery for the February 18th, 2020 regular meeting for council's consideration. I believe Marty's going to speak to this, and he has some company in the audience that's gonna help him and answer questions for us.
Thank you, Reed Bailey. So my report is a follow-up to the report from last December about the wording changes for the fees and charges bylaw. It explains the cost recovery for fire-related costs on structured fires through the insurance companies. This report explains circumstances that has led to the development of this bylaw. So it's pretty much self-explanatory in the report. But if there are any questions, Chris Carrier from Fire Marquee is here tonight. Fire Marquee is the company that we have went into agreement with to help recover these costs through the insurance companies. So it's a bylaw that we would like to introduce to make it easier for us to recover these costs.
Thank you very much. Would you like to speak to a bit, sir, or just answer questions?
Your worship, it's your home, your rules, I'll answer questions any you'd like, sir.
Okay, thank you kindly. I'm gonna open it up to the council then. Questions or comments for these gentlemen? Concerns? Go ahead, Kevin.
Through you. The collection of remuneration, is it hindered by municipal boundaries? Like when, say, fire department in North Huron responds in Central Huron or Morris Turnberry, is there a difference in the ability to recoup insurance from when they're happening on roadways that aren't in our municipality?
Through the brief to the councillor, your bylaw allows you the privilege to pass local legislation that affects your jurisdictional responsibilities, which is your municipal boundaries. So when you amend your user fee bylaw, it applies to services or products provided within your geographic location. If your neighbor, for example, would be on the program, let's say Township of Howick is on our program, if you responded to an incident there, then your costs are recoverable because they're on our program. If they came here and you're on our program, then their costs are also recoverable through your bylaw because they're in the geographic location where the bylaw is applicable.
My follow-up question is then, is Morris Turnberry or Central Huron or Ashfield, Colburn, Wallinash in your program?
Through the reeve to you, not as yet. We do have 110 clients in 5 provinces. We have 98 municipal clients in Ontario, so we are continuing to expand and grow, and we would like to have those municipalities, and it is my responsibility actually as the National Accounts Manager to try and get those accounts.
And a follow-on.
I know this one. Go out.
I guess maybe I'll reword the question then. Since those municipalities are not in our program, is there any difficulty with us responding to their jurisdictions and accessing our insurance reclamation in their territory?
So through your worship to the councillor, if I understand your question, if you have a service contract agreement with your neighboring municipality, you can request within that service contract for them to amend their fee bylaw to apply to the jurisdiction to which you respond in their municipality. So then it is geographic specific as opposed to their whole municipality. Because in Ontario, there's a number of municipalities that have 3 departments. We have 2 clients that have no fire department. The services are provided by 3 different municipalities in each case. So we can make it work. It just requires some cooperation usually between staff, clerk staff, and the neighboring municipality. But it can be done, and it has been done.
So I'm going to understand that one as a no. My next question would be to Marty then. When we go to municipal aid, not municipal aid, let's say mutual aid, and our resources are used to the extent through this plan is not recoverable?
Mutual aid is not recoverable because it's on a reciprocating.
But not on insurance. It would be like a car accident would be, like us responding into Central Huron. This Marquee doesn't cover.
So to answer your question, to follow up with that, that is, we have an agreement with Central Huron. When we respond into that jurisdiction, we can still apply for those costs. And that has happened. We've recovered fees at calls in Central Huron before.
So the only one we're recovering insurance costs from are our own calls?
Yes, right. Any calls that we respond to, because that's where we're incurring the costs.
So if I could follow up with that one, then a question's going to be, if I understand this properly, North Huron tries to recover everything they can to keep the price down. But if we have agreements with our neighbors, you're telling me none of them are part of that, but you could go to them and you could get them under contract and we could try to recover because it's our force that's going out into their territory.
Your worship, so you've been a client for a significant period of time.
Yeah.
So I was more familiar with when Chief Sparling was here, and I was also, I knew that there was relationships between your neighboring municipalities, and we were able to recover the costs, and I thank Marty for following up with that. So yes, I would like to get your neighbors on our program. It works. I'm a former mayor of the town of Collingwood in the county of Simcoe. So we have 16 member municipalities. 11 of them are on our program. So we just had a fire last week in the town of Collingwood, a significant commercial fire. Our neighboring municipality, Clearview, brought in air cylinders because we used 105 air cylinders, and we went through 1 million liters of water. So I can recover on a mutual aid call if it comes into a jurisdiction where I have a bylaw. I can recover those costs if I get a copy of the SIR, because both fire chiefs municipalities are on the program. I know I look at Clearview's SIR as I look at the town of Collingwood and recover those funds.
So if I understand this clearly, working with you folks costs us nothing, you're on a percentage. You make your money when you recover the money and you take part of the money. We don't pay anything up front.
That is correct. There is no annual, there is no minimum.
Okay.
It is strictly on a cost share basis. You receive 70% of the costs recovered, and we retain 30% for ourselves. Our largest client is the city of Kitchener. Our smallest client is the village of Newberry, with a population of 497 and a council of 5, so 1% of the population are elected officials. But they're all on the 70-30 split. Everybody is on the same split.
So I'm just gonna go to you in a sec, Kev. So Marty, could you two guys get together and could you see the people that we're servicing and could you ask them to join this? And if they say no, could this council find out? Thank you kindly. Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I had a follow-up question that might answer that too. The municipal municipal boundary partners, are they on a different system equal to Marquee? Like, are they collecting insurance through a different method? They're not representing.
Your worship,
Yes.
Firemark was created by a number of retired insurance adjusters. Our company president and his colleagues, the top 3, have 110 years of adjusting experience. Ted was senior claims manager for Royal Insurance for over 30 years. He used to handle $500 million in claims. He was on a catastrophic file in Texas when the coverage came up on a file there. And before he retired, he and some of his colleagues put together a plan saying we'd like to help municipalities in Canada because the coverage is in the United States and the coverage is here. We created Firemark, and knock wood, so far we are the only company doing this.
Thank you very kindly. Further questions? Trevor, sorry, Donna, go ahead.
May I just clarify? So Marty, my understanding is that all of our partners are under agreement with us, and so we have been through, if there was a call in Central Huron, we have been collecting that insurance through Firemark, and that money goes back into as shared with all our partners. There has been no problem with that for ACW, Central Huron, Morris Turnberry, and ourselves since we signed up with this. So they have been working, because our North Huron has the agreement with all those partners. Firemark bills out for us, whether, if the call was in Central Huron, then they've billed it and we've gotten the money, but it goes back shared to all our partners. Is that not correct, Marty?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, I just
But
wanted to be clear on that,
I
because that
think what-
wasn't really the way it was going.
I think what Councillor Faulkner was getting at was the mutual aid portion of it. Right now, if we respond right into Central Huron, like right into Clinton for a mutual aid call, we wouldn't be able to do a claim because that's not our call. However, so we don't get any cost recovery on that. However, because it's through mutual aid, if we need them in Wingham for a call, they come and assist us, and that's the reciprocal basis that happens.
But to be clear, the area in Central Huron that is covered under our fire agreement, we are collecting in those funds through fire.
Correct.
Right. Just
Correct,
wanna be sure.
because it's our call.
That's correct.
So historically, when the former chief and former CAO were here, because the relationship between the neighboring communities was done under contract, those recoverable options were included in the service provider. I don't have the municipality of your neighbor as a client. I have essentially you as the fire service provider as a client, and it's incorporated into the agreement. I would love to have them as a client.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Kevin.
So we're recovering insurance payables for our neighboring municipalities.
That are
For
in
the
that-
area that's covered
Yeah.
under
In
our
our
fire
territory.
agreement,
Okay,
in those areas.
so we're good to go. Trevor?
The question that I have is that, so the way my impression of this was that if a homeowner put in a claim, the insurance company was paying the homeowner, and nowhere did it say in the insurance arrangement that, oh, homeowner, you need to pay the municipality. So what, other than the bylaw being written, what gives it any more leverage to when you send out the bill to the homeowner saying, go pound salt, I don't want to pay you because I put the claim in, that has nothing to do with me. What is the process that's going to alleviate, because here's what my struggle is. If this now all of a sudden goes into legal, to collect this money, you're going to spend more money in legal than the 30% or the 70% that you're going to get back. So I don't know I just need to understand in my head, how does doing this bylaw and the wording changes in the bylaw change the fact that the insurance company isn't now goes, oh, there's a municipality here involved, and I should be writing my check to the portion of those costs to this municipality, not the homeowner, and there should be two payments go out the door, not one to the homeowner, and then the homeowner says, too bad, so sad. That's the part that I struggle with, no matter how this works and how the bylaw wording is written, because I still believe that that's what's going to happen. Is the homeowner's going to say, well, the municipality is tough titty. You haven't provided this information soon enough, and I went and rebuilt my house, or whatever structure that I needed to build. Through your worship to the deputy reef. The clear direction from legal, Jennifer Savini from Templeman Law in Brockville, Ontario, on behalf of Paul McAlderman, was to draft a standalone bylaw to create the linkage between the policyholder, because the previous bylaw only created a linkage to the insurance company. It was to take the tactic away of an insurance company sending the check to the policyholder and then telling the municipality, you're not entitled to the money because your bylaw doesn't provide any nexus, any linkage. But now it does. So it takes that tactic away. It's taken an insurance company 8.5 years to figure out a legal loophole in the existing bylaw, which is why we've gone to Templeman Law, or Alma Calderman did, went to Templeman Law and had it drafted. We paid for those costs on condition I could then put the new iteration of the bylaw before all of our municipal clients to take that tactic away. What I'm concerned with is in a large loss incident, an insurance company is going to send a check to the policyholder, and then you can't get the money, and I can't get the money for you either, because of there's no linkage in that policy. So we're closing that loophole. They're not going to employ a tactic that they know there is no legal loophole anymore. It will be closed. But And in this, with respect, there's 198 insurance companies. This was one. And I'm concerned that another insurance company may adopt a similar tactic. It will close the loophole. But my question is when we submit the claim, do we submit the claim to the policyholder, or do we submit it to the insurance company? We submit it to the adjuster. So let's say you're insured with Cooperators. I've seen Cooperators building down the street here. I know, our company knows who the adjuster is for Cooperators. We open a dialogue with them and say, has Reeve Bailey, at the incident that occurred on such and such a date as his home, made a claim against his policy? And they'll say yes, and we'll say fine, we're going to piggyback on that claims process. If the answer is no, it was a small fire because they put it out during halftime at the Super Bowl, then we just close the file. We piggyback on the existing claims process. Okay. And that's who our interaction is with. Some insurers have asked us to copy the information to the policyholder. As I said, there's 198. When we created the program prior to 2010, we anticipated having 5 or 6 streams of processes. We have dozens of streams. Like for the adjuster for Cooperators in this area, we may do it one way. For Ottawa area adjuster for Cooperators, we may do it another way. We do it the way that they want to ensure that we can get payment for you. Well, just my comment, that's a lot more clear to understand the process of how it gets submitted versus, because my impression was we were submitting the bill to the policyholder. Like here's the address that we and to solve that. To be even more clear and blunt, the policyholder in Alderman did not get to keep the money. He had to return the money to the insurance company. There's only two groups that are entitled to it: the insurance company, who doesn't pay out on it, or the municipal fire department. And if the municipal fire department doesn't get it, the policyholder doesn't get it, that would be fraud. The insurance company gets to keep it because it didn't have to pay out. Okay, thank you.
Interesting. Any other questions? Go ahead, Chris.
Yes, through you, Reeve. Just so I understand, so if a house goes and it's say $400,000 would be a replacement, and there was, easy figure, and $100,000 in Marty's cost. So you're going to recover the what did I say? 100? The 100?
So if
first,
it was Cooperators,
the rest goes to the homeowner.
No. So through
Reeve
to the counselor. So let's say there was $400,000 in damages to the home. So the insurance company pays to rebuild the house, to replace the contents, put the policyholder up in a hotel. All of that work is being done. Under the additional coverages section, there could be $1,000, there could be $5,000, $20,000, $25,000, or it could be unlimited, depending on the insurance company and the policy that they have. We have a database of 1,600 policy wordings. So to use the Cooperators example, if it was Cooperators, there would be $5,000 sitting there to offset the fire department costs. We invoice to the limits of the coverage, which is why on your budget we can recover maybe 0.75% to 2.4% of your costs, and the rest defaults back to the tax base through your normal budget. So the policyholder is not out of pocket for anything. It doesn't affect the amount of dollars that they're entitled to receive, and it's deductible exclusionary as well.
I gotcha.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll read the motion. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Fire Chief dated February 3rd, 2020 regarding a draft cost recovery bylaw, fire specific, for information purposes. And further, that the Council directs the clerk to finalize and bring forward a bylaw regarding fire specific cost recovery for the February 18th, 2020 regular Council meeting for consideration. Do I have a mover? Trevor, seconder. Anita, any more questions or comments? Last chance. Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very kindly for making the trip.
And I did serve 13 years in municipal politics. It's nice to see a council gets along so well. I chose to leave in 2010, but I do see lots of groups, and I always like to point out the groups get along quite well and respect one another. It's always a privilege to work.
Well,
with
thank
staff.
you ever so kindly. We appreciate that. Okay, guys, we can go at it when he leaves. Anyway.
Thank you very much.
We have nothing with building department, nothing with child care. We have 7.8.1, the CO, living wage analyst. And I'm just gonna read and get a motion on the motion first. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the CAO dated February 3rd, 2020 regarding a financial impact to becoming a certified living wage employer. And further, that the council provides direction to staff regarding the living wage employer certification. This time I'm not gonna ask for a motion, because we'll add, as Trevor said, we'll add what we wanna do to make one motion. Okay, let's open it up. Story, sorry, go ahead. I've already heard it, so.
So, as council recalled back last February, we received a delegation from the Perth Huron United Way requesting North Huron to becoming a certified living wage employer. And council directed staff to prepare a report regarding the financial impact on the municipality if council did wish to proceed with becoming a certified living wage employer. So just for the benefit of the public, a living wage rate is an hourly rate that a worker needs to earn to cover their basic expenses and to participate in their community. It's recalculated periodically, typically on an annual basis, to ensure that it accurately reflects changing living expenses. So in terms of to becoming a certified living wage employer, employers who do wish to pursue that certification, there's two requirements. One is they have to agree to ensure that all direct full-time, part-time, and contract employees are paid the living wage rate for the area. And if the employees are paid relevant non-mandatory benefits, the living wage rate will be taken into account. And secondly, certified living wage employers are required to insert a living wage clause stipulating that contracted workers and subcontracted workers are to be paid a living wage in all future contracts for staff who are direct employees are contracted to provide services to the organization on a regular and ongoing basis. So in terms of implementation can occur immediately or implementation can be phased. It can be phased in terms of you could begin as a supporter, then you become a leader, and then you become a champion. So a supporter is whereby all direct full-time employees are paid a living wage and the employer is committed to begin raising the pay of all direct part-time employees. A leader is whereby all direct full-time, part-time employees are paid a living wage and the employer is committed, but it's important to note not required, to include a living wage and service contracts. And then there's champion. And champion is where all direct full-time, part-time employees are paid a living wage rate and the municipality agrees or inserts clauses into their contracts that basically says that any contracted staff with municipality do need to be paid the living wage rate at that time or when the contract renews. So in terms of, so what is the current living wage rate? In 2019, the living wage rate for this area was $17.44. For 2020, this has increased now to $17.55. In terms of just looking at, from a staff's perspective, looking at our payroll for 2020, in terms of becoming a champion, in terms of beyond supporter, beyond leader, and a champion, the financial impact on our payroll is approximately $20,000. If that living wage rate of $17.55 didn't change, the financial impact on our payroll for subsequent years does drop significantly to $5,200 and $2,800 respectively. And those figures of $20,000, the $5,200 and the $2,800 would be in addition to the grid movements and the cost of living that has already been approved by council. As well, it doesn't take into account adjustments that we would need to make to our contracts, ensuring that any contract employee who works with us would be guaranteed that as well. The living wage rate does get adjusted, as I said, it says periodically, but typically on an annual basis. So as that living wage rate increases, so too do the cost to the municipality. In terms of the impact on us, it primarily impacts our bands 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are primarily our part-time staff. Primarily focuses on band 1, 2, and 3, but because of compression, it doesn't impact 4. And depending on the amount of increases over a period of time, it could impact band 5. Okay, so that's just important to note. But those are primarily your pay bands with your part-time staff. There are some full-time staff in there, but for the most part, full-time staff. Part-time staff. As I said, in order to maintain the certification, North Huron, we would need to increase the wages in bands 1 to 4 in accordance with the calculated living wage, and those adjustments would need to be done on an annual basis. And again, if compression was to occur between 4 and 5, we would have to start looking at band 5. So, as council is aware, our bands 1, 2, and 3 are currently based on the province's minimum wage rate. Adjustments by the province are applied to those bands. The living wage rate of $17.55 does exceed the province's minimum wage rate. So if North Huron was to become a certified living employer, the province's minimum wage rate requirement would be met. So there's no concern there from a provincial or legislative responsibility. Just as a point, I do indicate in there that the grid movements and the 1.5%, the budget impact, I believe I have in there is 156, but it's actually 140. So just a typographical error in there. So seeking direction from council in terms of, the report does speak to and outline the process. So if council wishes, can direct staff to begin that process, or council can receive the report for information, whatever council wishes.
I'm going to open it up to council. We're all aware that we had quite an increase on wages, a very hefty increase because of grid movements this year alone. Having said that, I'll open up to council. Go ahead, Kevin.
Comments, Nick. The first one is clause B in the external contractor, third-party staffing. Under the B clause here, if staff is not directly contracted by a municipality to provide work services, North Huron is required to advocate for a living wage clause to be included in the agreement and contract when it comes up for renewal. And also the first part where the all contracts or RFPs must include the living wage. I'm 100% behind North Huron being a living wage employer. But those two clauses, to me, send a message that we're also going to enforce that onto people that are going to be doing our RFPs. I just don't know whether it's our position as a municipality to say that the hardware store or the plumber has to meet these, we force them to meet them, or else they can't do an RFP with us. And the second thing was, should we delay the implementing this until we've conquered our budget this year, as we have a cost of living increase? It would be, I'm not saying one way or the other, but if the cost of living was adjusted and we gave the living wage, it would be in an imbalance. It should be all dealt with at the same time. It's only two comments I want to make.
Thank you, Kevin. Someone, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Reeve, I have trouble with it. We just cannot afford more. You know, having the grid thing happen, we're doing that one for the 140,000, as we're told. Man, and I dislike how the United Way just is dictating. This whole thing is dictating to us what we should do as far as labor. I don't like that. This is us. We decide how we deal with our labor force, our staff. Not some other outside group doing it. You know, it's 1755 or whatever it is as expected for this year. And, you know, what's it going to be next year and the next year? Like 20 grand is 0.5% increase in the rate. And that's just this year, and it's going to be next year. And we're going to have to deal with our own grid issues as they stand in cost of living, of which we're committed to doing. So this is just too much, more. I'm not this is socialism to me. I have trouble with this. It's $14 for the minimum wage, and they're going to be looking at it again in October or something, and that's what our provincial government decides. Provincial? Yeah. You know, we rely on our upper tier to decide what minimum wage is going to be, and you know, I just you know, our full-time people are all above 17 anyways, are they not?
Through you, your worship, I believe there's one or two individuals that within those bands that are considered, I believe in the rec department, Vicki, correct me, that are full-time, that are in those bands 1, 2, and 3. But for the most part...
And they will rise.
Yeah, but for the most part, the individuals in those bands are primarily our part-time staff.
Yeah. No, it's, to me, it's just too much money. You know, man, we just can't afford it. Our taxpayers cannot afford it because, you know, we're looking at other things coming down the pipe. Boy, we have to just draw the line somewhere.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else? Go ahead, Paul.
I just jotted this down. I was thinking, should we, as a municipality, be setting a wage that would be competing with businesses that contribute to our tax base? That's the way I feel with it. We're causing we're going to have them wanting to come up here, the other ones. To me, I think it should be the local business should be setting the wage. That's my thinking.
Other questions, comments, concerns? Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, I think we want to understand that the you're absolutely correct in the socialized as meaning of this is the living wage is meant to make sure that people who are on the living wage can survive. That is the intention of this. This is by social research development. They've put the research towards this. Anybody, municipality or home small business, can register to become a living wage employer. It's not just municipalities. Anybody can do it. My concern is not necessarily in the sense of the funding, because I think the issue I have is when you deal with this, typically it's usually a one-time cost, which normally happens when you have wage adjustments. This is talked about a one-time $20,000, and then on top of that, you're going to have cost of living. Because the cost of living will be cost of living. It's in the employment handbook right now that council can choose what percentage of cost of living that they provide. They don't have to go with exactly what's there. It's their prerogative. I think we have to be careful in the sense that we need to ensure that our wage not necessarily is dictated to the living wage, but is comparable and attractive to other entities. Because the municipal sector of employment is always changing. They're always looking for something better. You are not going to find very often in this day and age more people that spend 25 years in employment. I'm telling you that, it isn't going to happen. They're always looking for something different and looking for something that's going to benefit who? Themselves. Because if you're not going to look after yourself, nobody else is looking after you. So we as a municipality need to look at to ensure our wage is comparative and attractive to maintain our current level of employees and grow our employees. That's all we want. That's all we should ever strive for, whether it's a living wage or not. I think it's important to say we want to keep the people we have because we're paying them somewhat similar to other areas in which they can work, because then they're not, a happy employee is going to be a standing employee. And part of being a happy employee is what they get paid. That's fact in any business. So I think, this year I don't think we can do it. I think we're at a budget limitation where I think we have to watch where we go. But I'm okay to look at this from a budget perspective annually. Like we're gonna know what. Let's be clear. United Way is gonna come here in a year from now and they're gonna tell us what the living wage is. So if we keep up to date on what that living wage is, and incorporate it somehow into the budget process, maybe the discussion can be happening in a year or 2 years ago, and maybe because of grid movements and because of wage adjustments that we're doing, maybe we're already there. We could be already there.
We are, except for 2 people.
No, we're not.
No,
Gentlemen?
Dwayne just said it.
No,
Gentlemen?
we're not. We got a number of part-time employees that are not making.
Other than them.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that is the majority of our workforce in the summertime are part-time employees. Not full-time employees, are part-time. So we have to be careful about what we say and how we say it.
Kevin?
I have a question through you, to staff, if they can answer for me. If implementing the 1755, does that move, once you're above minimum wage, does that trigger anything in our policies that would entitle those people to automatically then become eligible for benefits? Does that move them up in their standing of that, or is it strictly just on hours that the benefits kick in?
I think Donna might answer that one.
Yeah, off the top of my head, there's criteria with our benefit company that they have to meet. I think it's based on hours, not dollars, but I will double check that for you.
I'm just curious to see if we pumped everybody up there and all of a sudden now we've got all those people now earning the benefit, and that's another $30.
So what I've heard from council, I'm just gonna throw this out there as a motion, see if somebody will put it forward. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the CEO dated February 3rd, 2020 regarding the financial impact to become a certified living wage employer. And further, that the council receive this for information purposes. Kevin's, Anita's gonna second. Any more questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? I'm gonna call the motion again, I didn't quite see that.
This is just for information
Only for
purposes.
information purposes, yeah. So, it passed. Okay. 7.8.2. We're gonna read the motion first. The Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a presentation from the CEO dated February 3rd, 2020 regarding an overview of the final version of the 2020-2023 Township of North Huron Strategic Plan for information purposes. Do I have a mover? I have Nita and I have Paul, and Dwayne's up.
Thanks, Your Worship. So primarily for the benefit of the public, on January 23rd, we had a special council meeting and council received a draft copy of the strategic plan and based on that has provided feedback. And on the council agenda tonight, we have the strategic plan in the bylaws presented for council for adoption purposes. But I think it's important just from the public's perspective to know kind of what the strategic plan is and what it's looking like. So in terms of, I'm just going to run through this quickly. It is available for anyone that wants to read it. In terms of the vision in our strategic plan is that the Township of North Huron is a prosperous, engaged municipality that welcomes visitors, family, and residents through strong agricultural development, culture, and tourism. The mission is that the Township of North Huron strives to offer an affordable and sustainable high quality of life by delivering excellent and efficient services to our residents, businesses, and visitors. In terms of our values, the values we've established that will guide us over the next 4 years is service excellence, teamwork, accountability and transparency, respect, and integrity. And with respect to principles, through integrity and responsible leadership, North Huron implements and maintains policies, practice, and regulations that are focused on exceptional and efficient service, designed to be inclusive and accessible, informed through meaningful and transparent community engagement, focused on growth, development, and modernization while being fiscally responsible, and aligned with our neighbors, fostering fair and balanced partnerships. So again, those are the values and the principles that are going to guide us over the next 4 years. The strategic plan is divided. There's 6 goals, that have been established. Under economy, which is one of the goals, our goal is to build a stronger economy through residential growth, retail, commercial, industrial development, tourism, and thriving agriculture. And we've identified a number of actions to achieve that, and I apologize in terms of the small print. The first is to improve the efficiency and timeliness of the development approval process. It's important to note that in terms of timing, when it says short term, that's 2020, medium term is 2021 to 2022, and long term takes us out to 2023. So in terms of improving the efficiency and timeliness of the development approval system, we've identified that as a short-term objective. Second is to complete and maintain an inventory of properties in the municipality and promote them as appropriate with a focus on municipally owned lands that could be developed. We've identified that as short-term for completion, but ongoing, maintenance being an ongoing matter. Third, collaborate with Huron County to promote business development opportunities and tourism in North Huron, such as providing information to attract new businesses, industry, and residents to North Huron, and designing and promoting a North Huron experience tour that would take visitors to notable destinations throughout the area. We have identified that as a medium-term objective. Next is to determine the future related to the Wingham Airport, and we've identified that as a medium-term objective. Review the current amount of funding being allocated to grants under North Huron Community Improvement Plan, a medium-term objective. Establish a visitor information session as a physical location and a kiosk, that's a long-term objective, so that's a 2023. Facilitate the development of Hutton Heights has been identified as a short-term objective. Continuing on in terms of community, our community goal is to be a vibrant and welcoming community that is proud of its roots, fosters volunteerism, has a strong arts and cultural presence, and supports community initiatives and special events. So in terms of our actions are to develop a more efficient events approval policy process and market community events in North Huron. This will be an ongoing matter. Develop a process or a program to recognize volunteers for their contribution to the community, a longer-term objective. Investigate opportunities to be recognized as a youth-friendly community, a long-term objective. Prioritize accessibility in the township's buildings and services. This will be an ongoing objective. Complete a community safety and well-being plan. This has been identified as a short-term objective on the basis that this is a legislative requirement to be completed by the end of this year. In terms of governance and modernization, we've established that the goal is to be fiscally sustainable, transparent, and forward-thinking municipality that works with its residents and stakeholders through communication and community engagement. And we've identified a number of action items with that. First, support advocacy efforts for the expansion of high-speed internet. That will be an ongoing objective, recognizing that Huron County Council and Council itself will be doing the advocating. Next is implement accessibility for Ontarians with the Disabilities Act requirements and Ontarians with Disabilities Act requirements. That's an ongoing objective. Third, support the Association of the Municipalities of Ontario's advocacy efforts for support of rural community needs. This is an ongoing objective. Develop a community engagement and communication strategy for the township, and we've identified that as a medium-term objective. to be completed by council, senior management staff, and consultants, again seeking their expertise. Update the township's digital processes, so this is looking at things like our website, which we're currently working on, our online payment options, and that's been identified as short-term. Implement professional development plans for staff. This has been identified as a medium term, so not this year, but in the next year or two. Evaluate the current size and structure of council, and that's been identified as a medium-term objective. In terms of infrastructure, the goal that we have is to be a municipality with well-maintained and thoughtfully planned infrastructure. And in terms of how we're going to complete that or achieve that goal, we're going to replace the current standpipe in Wingham in the medium term. We're going to develop a fleet replacement schedule in the short term. We're going to complete infrastructure mapping of all infrastructure in the short term. We're going to update the asset management plan that includes reviewing the current condition of the township's facilities, doing an audit of the road conditions and related infrastructure, and a 10-year capital plan to establish saving targets to meet capital management needs. And that update, while it's ongoing in terms of completion, is a long-term objective. Determine next steps related to surplus municipal infrastructure assets is a medium-term objective. In terms of services, the goal that we've established there is our goal is to offer high quality and well-balanced services that create a sense of belonging, support community well-being, promote safety, encourage healthy and active lifestyles. We identified some action items to continue to be involved in the physician recruitment efforts and ongoing. Continue to deliver public education, fire prevention of fire service programs ongoing. Review service agreements with neighboring municipalities and amend as appropriate. That's a short-term objective. Conduct a service delivery review contingent on external funding, and that's a short-term objective. And just as an update, I have not yet heard from the province whether or not we've been approved for the funding. Next is support local housing initiatives, an ongoing objective. Explore the feasibility of expanding daycare services in Blythe. That's been identified as a medium term, so again in the next year or two. Explore the feasibility of relocating the Blythe Library to a location where the township is not required to pay rent. That's been a medium-term objective. Develop a recreation master plan. That's been identified as something to be completed this year. In terms of the environment, this is our last goal. Our goal here is to protect our natural environment, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and support a healthy ecosystem. So in terms of our action items, review the township's involvement in the tree planting program with the focus on cost recovery, medium-term objective. Explore educational opportunities for waste reduction and diversion in North Huron, something that will be ongoing. Explore the possibility of adding more electric vehicle charging stations in the township on a cost recovery basis on the medium term. Strengthen the township's procurement policy to increase priority of sustainable and or energy efficient products. That's been identified as a long-term objective. Implement energy conservation efforts to reduce the carbon footprint in all township facilities, a long-term objective. Explore the possibility of a township environmental advisory committee, and that as well has been identified as a long-term objective. So as I indicated, the strategic plan itself is in the bylaws in your council packages for tonight. But that's just a high-level overview in terms of how the strategic plan is. And as we move forward, staff will be aligning our resources to the priorities that council is establishing in your strategic plan.
Thank you, Dwayne. Questions, councils, or comments from, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, through you, Reeve. Dwayne, well, that's for all of us. How do we deal with future bylaws or policies that just, fall in our laps that we weren't prepared for, but it was necessary? So is there a spot where we can just put in and necessary bylaws or future bylaws?
We'll give that to Carson.
We just talked about that today, so I'll let Carson answer that.
Through your worship. So this is something that other municipalities deal with as well, right? So what you might see in our staff reports now is when it's referring to a specific action item, it would say action item 5.2 kind of thing. But if like you mentioned, for those ones where it's a legislative requirement, it might read what other municipalities have done is as this is a legislative requirement, no consideration was given to the strategic plan. Something along those lines would be in the report instead. That's a common practice among municipalities.
But does it, okay, so it's fluid, but it also, you know, we were talking earlier about staff priorities, and these are the priorities here, but say something comes up. How is it dealt with as far as timeliness? Something in the future. And it's got to do with something legislative that's come down the pipe to us.
Trevor, go ahead.
So, the strategic plan's a guide. It's not in stone. Council can go off on a tangent any way they want and when they want to. This is supposed to be a direction from council to support staff and what their priorities are. If something comes up from a political perspective that council sees necessity in doing a bylaw or asking staff to do it more efficiently or more expediently than what our strategic plan says, we have the God-given right to do that and give direction to council or give direction to staff to do that. But in doing that, council needs to be aware that when you do that, something else isn't going to get done. So at the end of the day, it's a, you know, the intention for staff is when they give us a report, because we want to see the part in the report that says where does it match to the strategic plan. If we've asked them to do something because we think it's important but it's not on the strategic plan, I would expect staff put that in the comments of the report that says, you told us to do this because of X, Y, and Z. Here's what it's going to impact if we do this. If we do this going forward, something else has to come off, and that's how it becomes a fluid document. I don't think anything in the strategic plan needs to say that, because we are going to dictate, staff only do what we tell them to do, in essence from council direction. So I don't see how this can change. There's never an unknown of what's going to happen in the next 3 years.
So the other part of this too, Chris, is our staff will quite often say the Reeve just walked into the CEO's office and said, I want to go and do this and this and this and this. He's going to say, where is that, Bernie? And I'm going to say, but it's a great idea. And he's going to say, where is that, Bernie? Because there's what you gave me to work with. We need to go before council before you run off to the left field, because this is what a group decided to do. So whether it's myself or Anita or Kevin, we're not going to be going into anybody's office and say, this is the direction we have to, because they honestly could say, no guys, this is the direction you gave us, this is where our company's going to go. That's a great idea, but let's bring it before council before we go any further and make sure the council's a whole. So the whole idea is the staff doesn't go off on a different direction now, because if they came with some idea, we told them not to do anything with the armory, and all of a sudden 3 months ago, they come back in and they go, we want to spend $750,000 on the armory. We go, no, we didn't send that direction and it's not on here. So they know we don't want them wasting their time. That's the way I look at it. Before they start doing anything, they should reflect, is it going to be on any of these categories? If it's not, I better go see Reeve Bailey first and see if he can get his council to go with it, because it's not what we decided to do. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, that's good, Reeve. I totally understand, and Trevor, that's what I wanted to hear, is that, yeah, if something comes up and we look at it as a council, we go that way. But earlier with ATV guys, it was alluded not, you know, it's not in the thing, it's not in our strategic plan, so therefore it's sort of way down the bottom of the list. So, okay, you can say that, as long as we say we felt it was important, doesn't matter what it is, that or anything else, we can elevate it, as long as we as a council can elevate something.
Yes.
And not feel guilty about it.
I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, that's all I want to hear, is that we can move ahead with something,
yeah,
if it's really deemed necessary. We feel it's necessary.
Yeah. Carson's going to touch on that.
Through your worship, yeah. So there are avenues to get things on that were not reflected in the strategic plan, right? If council deemed the development of this bylaw to be a priority that needs to be addressed, council has the ability to pass a motion saying they'd like to receive a staff report by X date, right? Then that is also providing a staff direction, right? That would give staff direction that, okay, that's something we need to prioritize, but like Deputy Reeve Syke indicated, that you always have to be aware that that might mean something else is being pushed, right? The other avenue is council has the ability to put notice of motions forward, right? Council can put forward a notice of motion. This is on the premise that this might be a great idea that needs to be considered. We weren't aware of it at the time of the development of the strategic plan. That's your avenue, right? But when you put forward a notice of motion, the rest of council will be under the understanding that this is not currently in the strategic plan. So either council will agree that it's important enough to provide direction to staff to, or council might say, this wasn't identified as our priorities in the strategic plan exercise. Can you show how it fits into one of our action items, or what have you?
Okay.
So in essence, there's many avenues for staff to provide, or for council to provide direction to staff still.
Okay, other questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I do believe I have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Carries. And Dwayne's up again for Remembrance Day, that the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the CEO dated February 3rd, 2020 regarding Remembrance Day. And further, Council declares Remembrance Day as a statutory holiday. And further, the Council directs staff to prepare an amendment to North Huron's Human Resources Policy for the purposes of reclassifying the Remembrance Day to a statutory holiday. I'm actually not going to ask for a mover or seconder to this one until after we spoke about it, in case somebody has difficulty with that. Okay, so go ahead. Dwayne, are you going to speak to this one?
So this actually has come up as we're currently, as council will recall, we've hired a consultant who's currently doing a review of our HR policies. So one of the things that has come up is in terms of Remembrance Day. Remembrance Day is a Memorial Day, as we're all aware, that's observed on November the 11th to remember members of the armed forces who have died in the line of duty. And on that day each year, there are ceremonies held in communities across the country to show respect and gratitude for armed forces personnel who are currently serving or have served and made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. In the North Huron, in our current Human Resource Policy Manual, Remembrance Day is classified as a paid non-statutory day. What that basically means is that we as staff are required to maintain the services of the municipality on that day, and in return, or in doing so, full-time employees are then provided with the opportunity to use Remembrance Day as a floater. So basically that day that they worked can be used any other day in the calendar year. So just in terms of the approach currently, the thinking or the suggestion here is that the approach that we're currently doing in North Huron is not in keeping with the purpose of what the day is intended for, which is to observe Remembrance Day. So we reached out to our other municipalities, other Huron County municipalities, just to find out in terms of how other municipalities treat it. All municipal offices on Remembrance Day are closed, with the exception of us, and with the exception of Central Huron, and Central Huron opens their offices at 1 o'clock on that particular day. But they do not open in the morning, so that staff can in fact attend services in their communities. There are services such as daycare that tend to operate in full days, and there would be some inconvenience for parents who enroll their child for a full day, in terms of if you open for a half day versus a full day. I would suggest, as a parent myself, it's easier just to plan in advance, knowing that that services are not available that day, than to trying to figure out something for half a day for services. So, the reclassification, if council does not have any financial impact on the municipality. Those staff do take that day off. It just may not be on the 11th, but it'll be on a different day of the week. But again, it's suggested that that's not in keeping with what the intent is in terms of the purpose of that staff having that day off.
Thank you, Dwayne. I'm gonna open up to the council for a conversation. Who would like to start? Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Reeve. Myself and my family have always considered Remembrance Day a statutory holiday, whether our employers at the time celebrated it or observed it. I personally would wish it would have been a national holiday for the entire country. I'm in full support of the motion to allow the staff to take that as a statutory.
Paul?
I'm with Councillor Kevin. I feel it should be used for what it was meant for.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Rick.
Absolutely, I support
Anyone
what
else?
it's meant for.
Anyone? I totally agree with it too. It's the day it should be used, the morning it should be used, and if someone chooses not to, so be it, but they shouldn't be given a day in August to make up for it. I'm not seeing anybody disagree, so I'm going to read the motion. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the CEO dated February 3rd, 2020 regarding Remembrance Day, and further the Council declares Remembrance Day as a statutory holiday. And further that the Council directs staff to prepare an amendment to the North Huron Human Resources Policy for the purpose of reclassifying Remembrance Day to a statutory day. Do I have a mover? I have Trevor and I have Paul. Last chance for comments. Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Okay, correspondence are next. Moving right along, we're just sailing. Home by midnight yet. Huron County Federation of Agriculture request for support of Bill 156. Anybody want to speak to that one?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I guess I should look up, shouldn't I? Sorry, Anita.
Bill 150, sorry, Bill 156 is the Security from Trespass and Protecting Food Safety Act 2019, new legislation to protect farmers, livestock and our food supply chain. Ontario farmers follow strict codes of conduct to ensure the health, safety and welfare of all farm animals. Bill 156 intent is to protect farms, our families and the safety of our food chain by addressing the ongoing threat of unwanted trespassing and activists who think it is their right to disrupt farms and the safety of our food and animals. The Ontario Federation of Agriculture has written a letter that I would strongly encourage Council to support. Copies of the letter would go to Lisa Thompson, Minister of Agriculture, our Premier, Ontario Premier, and well, it's if you go to the link that's on this letter, then there's a whole list of people who would be in recipients of
So you'd like to put a motion of support?
I would like to put a motion of support.
Do I have a seconder? I have Chris. Further comments or conversations? Trevor?
I would say of the number of items that were brought up at the at Roma, I would suggest that this one probably got most of the standing ovation of the agricultural small and rural municipalities of Ontario. So, you know, I would say that in saying that, it only makes sense that we protect what is rightfully agricultural reasons, and I think it's my support is definitely there for it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Paul?
100% behind it.
Okay, my friend?
Yep.
Seeing no more comments or questions, I call the vote. All in favor? Carries. Next is a cross-border servicing request for J.E. Hodgins Lumber Limited. I'm going to open it up to the council for discussion. Trevor?
Based on the fact that we're going through, we're still going through negotiations, and I would say they've been productive. They've been very productive negotiations, discussions with the cross-border services agreement. my suggestion would be to motion to defer any connection discussions until an agreement is signed with our neighbors.
Do I have a seconder? I have Anita. Questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Reeves' activity report is next. I know it was gonna be such a long night, I wouldn't have made so much up to talk about. I went to the 2020 Roma conference since last we met. Three things that stood out for me. The rural healthcare was interesting, and it was much more complex than I realized. And I'm learning that on the county. It's just not so easy. It is a very complicated situation. The other one was building communities through smarter energy, about independent electrical system operators and how small utilities are making a comeback and the difference for everybody. I'm hoping to have them actually come to speak to council or EDC. It's very interesting what's going on out there with them. The other one was more choice, excellent how things operate. The one that caught my ear was leasing land. If we own land, leasing land and letting somebody put a house on it. And I really thought of that, and I'd like to have, we'll set up meetings to talk to the council about this, because a house is gonna be $350,000 for anybody to build right now, or more. But they talked about, and it's called the Bluffs right up here on the lake here at ECW. And what they do is, instead of selling the land, they lease the land for long term, and then somebody builds a house on it. So you just drop the cost of your house $100,000. It's only $250,000 to buy a house, which can put it into somebody that's on a lighter wage than, what's the proper term? I'm not sure, for minimum wage or less than $25 an hour, or whatever it is for.
$17.55.
That's it. So this gives them opportunity to actually buy their first house or their last house. The actual details on how it's set up and that, I'm not sure, but they're building one in Meaford right now. As I said, ACW has one on the Bluffs. I forget, Collingwood has one already built, and I'd like to further that one down the road and have a conversation with that company or different people and people that have done with it. I think that could be the greatest help to our industry in this area. We have to look at alternatives. People cannot afford a $350,000 and $400,000 house. And as a community that owns Hutton Heights, we may be sitting right in a place where we could really make a difference, and we could set the pace for folks around us. So I want you to give that some thought, and we'll try to get that before you. Our acute labor shortage meetings are going very well. We've branched off. We have now another branch that went over to look at what we call the newcomers that have come to Canada and can't speak English and missed their homeland and feel left out. And the subcommittee of that, a week ago today, met over at the library with the newcomers, and they had a really good time. Some of them are starting to learn a bit of English. They are working in our factories, and it's going along pretty good. On the 10th, the Bruce County representatives are going to be coming to the Acute Shortage Center. It's blossomed over across our borders. There is a major problem with anybody that looking for people to work for them. We've just kind of settled down where we're feeling a little bit of breath of fresh air because our factory's in good shape. And we got a factory opening up in Teeswater. It's going to need 50 employees, and we got 100 employees needed down at this end of town. And we still haven't filled the employees we have at the factories. We have a big problem. And it's not just housing, it's housing, it's learning how the newcomers to be part of our community, it's the jobs, the training, it's just so involved, and we're spreading out in different ways. And it's all about the volunteers. It's the volunteers that went and met with the newcomers and had a conversation, coffee and cookies with them, and we ran into them, Angie and I ran into them in the store the other day, and they're looking forward to the next meeting. Said I might even show up, and they said, no, we're having a good time, Bernie. Anyway, that was a joke. But they don't know me yet, Trevor. So anyway, we're moving along in a lot of things. I just thought I'd touch on those few subjects. And now I'm going to open up to council for people that have, the council members that have gone to committee meetings and that. If we can have a go around the table and let us know what's going on. Thank you.
So
Oh,
Kevin.
thank you. Through you, Reeve. The latest Blythe Business Association meeting was held this week, or no, sorry, last week. I have to say they're taking seriously the parking dilemma that we have in Blythe. They've put their heads together and they've come forward with quite a few recommendations that are easily implementable and very cost effective. May just be a signage or just a change in a parking bylaw. But they've come to this conclusion or this roadmap by involving everyone in the community, the business owners as well as the some of the theater and such, to come to some kind of a plan. They will be coming forward and presenting to council their draft of what they think is possible for our consideration in the near future. I'd say commend them for putting the effort forward and not just asking for a solution, but actually coming up with one on their own that takes into consideration the costs and how it affects all of how things flow and how the businesses work.
We're looking forward to that. I'm sure I speak for all of council when I say that. Thank you, Kevin. Anyone else? Anita?
Yes, Maitland Valley Conservation Authority had their meeting. They are working on their budget right now. It's a very difficult area to get it balanced. They are asking for a bit of an increase from the municipalities. The letter to the municipalities is sent out today, I understand. They had some good news. The Department of Fisheries and Ocean, they had some funding there for 2019 and 2020 for stewardship projects around the Middle Maitland Headwaters Restoration Project that is north of Wingham. Then the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks funded $60,000 to the Garvey Glen Priority Project, and that is it's more towards the lake, and it's helping farmers to have projects to have less nutrients and soil going into the lake. The proposed Wingham area floodplain mapping goes out for public consultation on March the 10th, and there will be an information meeting in the Knights of Columbus
March
here
10th.
in Wingham, March the 10th, yeah.
March 10th.
I'm not sure of the time that will go out. The Physicians Recruitment Committee is sending out a budget as well. Their budget is comes from percentage usage in the hospital and the family health teams. Yeah, it went down a little bit for North Huron. It was funded at 39% of the total budget, and it's now at 38%. And the rest is funded by municipalities around us.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Christopher?
Yeah, to add to Reeve Bailey's comments about the Roma, I got a really good sense of being part of something big going there, and I can't wait to go to the AMO as well, because you're part of 1,300 people, all representing different rural municipalities, and you've got a sense of necessity, like you've got a job to do, and it felt like you've got it in your hands to be endeavoring with all the time. But yeah, I really like that. The provincial budget is about $50 billion towards municipalities, so it was, you got a good idea of how Roma and then AMO, the importance of those groups are as lobbying. The lobbying efforts that they make, like holy, that they do, it's so important. If they didn't do it, I'm not sure who would. One of the guest speakers talked about telling the story, or telling your story, and it's advertising. Basically, it's creating your brand. It's your message selling your community. So we're trying to sell. North Huron's a wonderful place to come and live, and we've got jobs. we need a story, we probably do, but we need a story that all develops all that. And there's just some nice key points here, and it's trust should be felt, not stated. Powerful stories have a long shelf life and make people feel your message, not just understand it. It's so easy to make people understand what you're trying to say, but no, it's got to resonate in them, and it goes further. And I don't know, it was good.
Yeah, I was with that one too. Anything, Rick? Paul?
Yes, we had a museum meeting January 20th. And we got one thing done. We came up with a vision statement, and it's to be recognized as a vibrant community museum dedicated to preserving, interpretation, and celebrating our artifacts, stories, and cultural heritage. So that's one. Was there anything else, Vicki? That's what we got done. Next meeting coming up, we couldn't do it till March the 2nd, but there's got to be some things done so we hit those numbers at the end there. So it's going well.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only comment I would have to Roma is I've been going to Roma. I've been 4 years. I didn't go to one of those years, and I would argue that there's stuff on the topics that have been there for 5 years. 10 years probably. So the argument of that things don't move real fast in the municipal sector, they don't move real fast in the municipal sector. Broadband internet has been talked about for 15 years, and it will continue to be a discussion at the municipal table until the province mandates providers to get at the table and decide on this, how this is going to happen. Like, at the end of the day, everybody's looking out for their own pocket, and I don't see it changing until something's mandated legislatively that says you got to get to the table and figure out how this is going to work for small and rural municipalities, because we're talking about it for 15 years, we'll be talking about it for another 15 years. And the waste is another discussion that's been going on for 5. So I think those types of things, I think it's a great conference. I think it's great to keep involved, but the frustrating part about it is the conversations are still the same. They're the same discussions every year in some of those, and you don't seem to get any. There doesn't. The movement is so minuscule that it just seems like you're talking about the same stuff that you just talked about a year ago, and it hasn't moved any farther.
Mm-hmm. That was actually the top conversation. No, anyway. Comments from members of council. Go ahead, Anita.
Yes, I would just like to mention to everybody that the fire hall moved, and I would like to congratulate Sean, his team, Marty and his team, and anybody else involved, the firefighters with their new hall. I think it's a wonderful process, and congratulations on moving in time, and really well done.
How did you get it done that fast?
A whip.
Great contractor.
We also like I'm sure we'd all like to throw a thanks out to the Sparling family and the Cowbell Brewery, because they were holding up their ideas, their plans, and they're moving forward while we kind of stumbled a bit on that. And they didn't give us a hard time about it. They stepped forward as a great community player and stayed with us right till we needed them, and that's fantastic. Okay, anyone else? Not seeing any, let's go to the bylaws. 11.1, a bylaw to authorize the agreement of purchase of sale for the Blythe Lions Club for the former Blythe Lawn and Tennis property. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin. Do I have a seconder? I have Anita. All in favor? Carries. Bylaw number 11.12, a bylaw to authorize the Region Clerk to sign on behalf of the Council a website agreement between the Corporation of the Township of North Huron and the eSolutions Group for website services. Do I have a mover? I have Chris and I have Paul. All in favor? Carries. 11.3, a bylaw to amend Schedule C building classes and fees to a bylaw number 117-2019. Being a bylaw to establish fees and charges for the Township of North Huron. This will be read only a first and second time. Do I have a mover? Trevor, and Rick. All in favor? Carries. The reason we did that, folks, we want to give people a little more time to look at it in case they want to come in. 11.4, a bylaw to authorize the agreement with Omega Contractor, Inc. for the Carling Terrace construction contract. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin, seconder, Paul, all in favor? Carries. Bylaw to appoint the administrative assistant deputy clerk for the Township of North Huron. Do I have a mover? I have Paul, I have Anita seconding. All in favor? Carries. Bylaw number 15, 2020, a bylaw to appoint lottery license officers for the Township of North Huron. Do I have a mover? I have Trevor, I have Rick. All in favor? Carries. Bylaw number 16-2020, a bylaw to adopt the 2020-2023 strategic plan for the Township of North Huron. Do I have a mover? I have Anita and I have Paul seconding. All in favor? Carries. Announcements. The next regular council meeting will be held Tuesday, February 18th at 2020 at 6 p.m. here at the Chambers. The next Economic Development Committee meeting will be held on Thursday, February 13th here again in the Chambers. The next House and Dam Committee will be held on Wednesday, February 19th, but did you just not say that changed, Paul?
No,
Oh, okay, that's, okay. Sorry about that, Kevin. Here in the Chambers. Do I have a mover? Oh, sorry, that, yeah, caught myself off guard there. The next budget meeting will be held on Thursday, February the 20th, at 2020 at 9 a.m. at the North Huron Council Chambers. Other business. Go ahead, Trevor.
Reed Bailey, I just because I wanna make sure it's on record that, I wasn't here during the consent agenda and the bills of account, so I do have a conflict of interest on, check number 505034 that I'll be presenting to the clerk. It's made out to my wife for reimbursement of expenses for the daycare. She's a full-time employee, so I'm just declaring the conflict just so that it's on record.
Yep, thank you, Trevor. There's no closed session tonight. Confirmation of the bylaw. Bylaw number 17, 2020, being a bylaw to the Township of North Huron to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by the Council of Township of North Huron. Do I have a mover? I have Christopher. Seconder. Going once, going twice, Rick. All in favor? Carries. Adjournment, that the Council of Township of North Huron agrees to being no further business for us. We're gonna adjourn at 9:05. Do I have a mover? I have Rick and I have Paul. All in favor? Carries. Thank you, everyone.